guys. It's been, and then drop right back down, but very interesting. I always get a kick out of that. But okay, here I go. Ready. Thank you for your patience. Hey, everybody. Tonight we're debating whether or not the U.S. should continue to support Israel, and we're starting right now with Counterpoints' opening statement. Thanks for being with us. Counterpoints, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Connor. I run a political channel named Counterpoints. I would consider myself a neoconservative. I'm somebody who appreciates the United States imperial war machine, the military-industrial complex, all of its benefits, and Middle Eastern and North African oil bought with trillions of dollars and the blood of thousands of Americans. I'm a military veteran myself. I'm a law enforcement officer, veteran as well. And so I think that an ordered society and a just society and a just world has been better implemented by the United States and its allies than any of our rivals or peers. I think that isolationism is a dream. I think it's a farce. I think every time that we've tried it in the past century and a half, it's led to horrific bloodshed. And I would like to minimize as much bloodshed as possible for as many people as possible. When it comes to Israel in particular, if we believe the post-war consensus about what happened during World War II, then what happened was there were roughly 16 million Jews in the world. A third of them got wiped out in Europe. As a result, they moved to two primary locations. Approximately half of them moved to the state of Israel, and half of them moved to the United States. The modern population of Jews in the world is around 16 million, meaning that it's approximately recovered from the pre-World War II downfall. And so as a result, there's a pretty neat, aggressive tie between the United States and the state of Israel, because while we had a fractious relationship between the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we ended up becoming closer friends after Lyndon Baines Johnson. We can talk about Christian nationalism. We can talk about isolationism. We can talk about Zionist Christianity. We can talk about Zionist conservatism. We can talk about the Israel lobby. We can talk about AIPAC. We can talk about the military-industrial complex. But the truth is that if you look at what Israel needs to do in reference to its geopolitical analysis, it does not need the $3.8 billion that we provided every year. Likewise, they probably don't need the $2.5 billion that we pay Jordan and also Egypt in order to not attack Israel. They could probably pay off the Jordanians, pay off the Egyptians, and stand on their own 2 feet. The reason why we want to continue to support them, though, is because we do obviously have that historical tie. We obviously do probably have a moral cause in making sure that there's not a mass massacre of Jews in the world. I would also say that there's a geopolitical goal of having a backdoor into the Middle East and North Africa that is reliant upon us geopolitically from a military perspective. And then finally, I would say that the intel, the technology, the commercial trades, the microchip manufacturing, all of that stuff is advantageous to the United States. And I would not want to squander that technological advantage and allow it to fall into the hands of our rivals, China or Russia. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for that opening. And folks, as you can see at the bottom right of your screen, DebateCon 7 Modern Day Debates official conference is happening this very Saturday, January 31st in Houston, Texas. It'll have debaters such as David Wood, Apostate Prophet, Daniel Hakikachu, Mike Jones, Inspiring Philosophy. You don't want to miss it. Grab your tickets at the link right now. We're expecting to sell out. No joke. Grab your tickets now. With that, we're going to kick it over to JF for his opening as well. Thanks for being with us. JF, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you. I take issue with the broadness of the view that Counterpoints is illustrating here. It is extremely narrow what we are being offered. So a little insert into the Middle East, a backdoor, maybe a little microchips here or there. Maybe they're hackable. Maybe they have some biased firmwares that can be penetrated by intelligence agencies. I mean, you wouldn't give manufacturing to a foreign entity for your chips like China. And I cannot understand why we would do it with Israel. I cannot understand how that's a good argument that they're producing chips when, in fact, if it was China producing those chips, you'd have the whole Congress vote laws to make them illegal because they'd be scared that they will be used against us. And what we know about the behavior of Israel across the decades is that it is always self-interested, to the radical point of pursuing lies publicly, of misleading population, misleading the American public, and subverting the political process in the US. So when you make a list of these small advantages, maybe a moral cause, maybe a backdoor, the problem is all of this could be discussed on a table if it was $1 billion or two across decades. But we're not talking about this. The cost of the sacrifice that American society is doing for Israel is in the trillions of dollars. It is in the absolute subversion of the totality of its democratic process to the advantage of a bunch of elites who are cashing out on America, who are using American lives to undertake imperial projects across the Middle East. They enrich themselves in the process, and then they run away with the money to Israel. And what do we find ourselves with? Billionaires living for the cause of Israel, ride or die, and they will never give it up. And they have decided that the entirety of America was like a lemon that they can press for self-enrichment, for the rise of their stock value, and for an entire industry of manufacturing that causes enormous amounts of human suffering, genocidal wars, and the destruction of human lives. There is a massive moral cost to what the alliance between the US and Israel means, and it's way beyond the amount of money that we're sending. So yes, let's list the big reasons why the advantages that Counterpoints is listing today do not matter. They're way too small compared to what we're paying. One, the cost itself. So across the decades, we've been sending a total inflation-adjusted $300 billion directly to Israel, while our political process was subverted by their own agents, by their own people, sponsoring our two political parties on both sides, ensuring that every year Congress is sending that aid. That aid flows into the Israel economy in terms of technological dominance in the Middle East, in terms of enrichment of Jewish billionaires, and in terms of giving them an advantage politically to even subvert other nations like Egypt, Jordan, etc. So we're giving them a fund to make even more mess in the Middle East than there would be arising naturally on its own. That money is working against us because then we're the ones who have to sacrifice American lives to go repair those mess. Like when we go in Iraq, Afghanistan, and it doesn't work, or when we strike Iran at the request of Israel. All of this has been done in the service of Israel. And that 300 billion is really a floor figure for what the true amount is. The true amount should include everything that we've invested in those Middle Eastern wars, the aid to Egypt, the aid to Jordan, the deals that we do, the Libya revolutions, all the little revolutions and terrorist groups that we sponsor. We'd be realizing that we have lost trillions of dollars on this service to Israel in the Middle East. There is also a human cost. Counterpoint tries to make the point that the American empire is good for the world, that we have created a fairer world. We haven't. We have created a world of genocide. We have literally looked in silence as Israel was executing a genocide of the Gazans, and all we could do was look at the pictures, look at the videos, but it's been happening, and the one nation that hasn't spoken about it yet is the US. The one nation that stood with this violation of human rights and this destruction of life is the US, in complete opposition to its stated Christian values, disrespecting human life just to transform these societies into what Israel dreams of, which is complete control in the Middle East. Another cost that is not quantified in the $300 billion of aid that we've sent is the cost on the mechanism for the search for truth in our society. The fact that we have a political interest, that there are agents in America with a political interest in defending Israel no matter what, has deprived us of a mechanism for the search for truth. Through our academic and intellectual and our media, everyone is an agent of APAC, of sponsored groups that are supporting Israel. And because of it, we can't access the truth. We don't have an intellectual class that can say, when it's time to say it, no, there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so what do we get? We get a public process that is, instead of searching for the truth, it is searching for the reasons to justify Israel's imperialism. And they needed a reason to invade Iraq, and they invented it. As a result, we don't even have a mediatic capability to call out those lies as they happen. We have to wait 5 years, 10 years down the line, and then it's too late. America has been drawn into the quagmire. We have invested hundreds of thousands of lives on our side and on the other side in waging those wars. And all of it for nothing because it was based on lies. Finally, in a long-term concern, beyond the moral and human rights concern of the idea of exterminating populations, which should be objectionable on its own, strategically, the alliance between the US and Israel is putting the US into an isolated corner, which they will pay for in the long run in terms of the credibility of the empire, in terms of the hatred that is being generated against Americans due to this behavior, this careless behavior of you need to submit your nation to our will, you need to sell us your oil or whatever it is that you got that we want, or else we will invade you, or else we will kill your leaders, like Muammar Gaddafi here. One example of a victim of the American empire, a great man who hired my father. My father was working for Muammar Gaddafi. My father was a welder, and Muammar wanted to build a very long pipeline to carry water for his people in Africa. And my father went there, and he worked for him. He was a great man, no reason to kill this man. And when we kill these leaders that are the natural emerging authorities of their own nation, of their own sovereign nation, what we're trying to launch a message, and it's a message on behalf of Israel, which is if you don't submit yourself to the money imperial system that Israel has built and has thought up for the Middle East, if you try to seek independence, if you try to seek your own enrichment, we will destroy you and we will put puppets in your place. And what do we see from these societies that we intervened in, whether it's Afghanistan, Libya? They're not doing better because we intervened. In fact, we have thrown these societies into chaos. Afghanistan was held by us for what, more than 15 years? And we have nothing to show for it. The minute we ran away from Afghanistan, we had to escape with the soldiers running to helicopters, because the crowds would become violent or chaotic. And we have nothing to show for this. All we can do when we intervene on a sovereign nation like this, we can spend trillions of dollars in trying to control these societies. But the minute we look away, the minute we're not willing to invest these ridiculous amounts of money, these societies converge back to what they are. And in a way, I think that's what Israel wants, and that's what's worrying. Israel wants chaos. They don't want strength in any of the nations surrounding them because they are paranoid, really. They are paranoid at the idea of other nations having success and having sovereignty. And so they deny it by causing chaos and by using the US as its puppet to cause that chaos and benefit from it.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening as well. And before we jump into the open dialogue, quick housekeeping point. As you can see at the bottom right of your screen, you're like, James, I can't make it. I'm in Antarctica. It's too long of a flight. you can watch all of DebateCon 7 from the comfort of your very own home. It's a perk for our Final Word channel members. Check out our channel memberships. You can watch it live from home. It's going to be 4 heavyweight debates this Saturday. And with that, we're going to switch it into open dialogue. Gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of horse shit in that, but I wrote it all down so we could address it point by point if you wanted. So we would object to it being China who had microchips. Okay. My position would be that there is a difference between our allies, our enemies, and our rivals. And I think that China is a combination of a rival and an enemy. And that their society, with the way that they dictate their society, with authoritarian control, with a police state that disappears people routinely, including the most powerful members of government, a kleptocracy that effectively steals from its own people and kills you if you question it. Whenever there's pro-democratic protests, for instance, in Hong Kong, or even them threatening Taiwan, effectively they crack down, threaten, and kill those people routinely. There's a difference between, I don't know, maybe our alliance with Saudi Arabia, which could be accused of the same things, but they sit on a third of the world's oil and are therefore a necessary evil ally, versus capitulating to a society that is actually in direct competition with mixed economy capitalism and free societies. And this should be like obvious and self-evident.
That's important, but you are approaching it from the wrong direction. But in a way, I appreciate that you're saying it that way, because I think it's important we understand the meta structure here of how this view emerges that China is even an enemy. This view that China is an enemy is ridiculous on its face to me. I know the contrary is ridiculous to you, but China is a nation that, among all the big nations, has probably been the one most cheering for peace in the world and for the respect of other national sovereignties. Their constant public policy is to always root for peace and demand more peace. Even in the allies are in a war like Ukraine, they want that to be resolved. So the idea that China is an enemy to be perceived really stems from a very Israeli conception of the world in which we need to eliminate competition. I don't think we gain in treating China as an enemy. In fact, if you count in the USS Liberty incident, one could easily make the argument that that Israel is much more of a questionable ally than China is. China doesn't attack the US. And so this conception that we should start with the expectation that China is hostile to us is something exactly being pushed by the neocons, which you identify as. But this whole war against Iran, for example, appears to be just little chipping at the Chinese empire, at the kind of alternative rising of an alternative force. I personally, looking at it, I see a better world if there are competing forces in the world than if there is just one monopoly of it.
Hey, can you admit that an authoritarian society can be incredibly peaceful? So, for instance, let's say that the Uyghurs in Western Xinjiang, they have Islam as a religion, and as a result of this differences in religion, they do terrorist attacks. Well, if you culturally genocide them, if you force their women to live with Han Chinese men, if you basically send the Han Chinese men to work camps for 5 to 10 years, and you basically say, hey, if you act up again, we're sending you right back to prison. Or with the Falun Gong religious minority, effectively, hey, you're contrary to the aims of the Chinese Communist Party, therefore we're going to incarcerate you. And yeah, you can have incredible peace. But the other thing that you can have is you can have, number one, bodies sold to the like body exhibit in the United States, where effectively the people who were put on display as like dissected and waxed human beings were in their 30s, and there was questions about whether or not they were euthanized. And then also you can go ahead and take a look at this as well. you can get, if you're a rich person, you can get a vital organ from China within a matter of 2 weeks. And the suspicion is that they're euthanizing their prison population and then selling said organs in a belief of the corporative whole, the bodily whole. The health of the nation is going to be restored through the elimination of these, parasites and these disruptive forces. It's an incredibly peaceful society, and yet I would say that these are like moral horrors that shouldn't be tolerated.
Well, on the idea of the Chinese government forcing women to be with a Han Chinese man, I intend to claim that right. And so I would ask the Chinese government to send me a Chinese waifu. I identify as a Han Chinese man, and I am demanding my Chinese girlfriend. That being said, on the other things you mentioned, the problem with these moral claims against China is that they are selective, and they are targeted at supporting war language and a war conception of the world, with China being an enemy. We don't. And you even in your own speech said, well, if they had all, maybe we could look away from these human rights violations, but they don't. They're not offering us all, so it doesn't matter. So what I see here is not a true humanitarian concern for these things. Chinese society overall is not the worst. It's not even close to among the worst nations in terms of human rights compared to Africa, compared to the rest of the world. China qualifies as a top humanitarian nation within, say, the top 50 easily in terms of how they treat their people currently. So yeah, I can join you on being morally offended on some of these things you've listed, but it's like, it doesn't matter. First, because it's a matter of internal civil rights. Not all nations must converge toward an American Revolution where we start praising, homosexual marriage and that kind of stuff. Some nations converge toward other civil rights history. And in a way, I kind of admire China for converging toward that different history. In a way, perhaps the Chinese people is being protected by this lack of humanitarian concern compared to the US. We don't know if the US population is sustainable with the current wind of the cultural left and the anti-natalist discourse that are spreading into it. And between existence and the continued existence of a people and the anti-natalist alternative that we're pushing in the US, who knows, maybe China has the right way into the future.
Yeah, but you understand that this is like a deeply ironic statement coming from you, considering the history of the 20th century, where the entirety of the Chinese Communist government itself was anti-natalist, instituted a one-child policy. This led to female infanticide and a collapsing birth rate that in and of itself, they're going to have a worse baby bust. They're going to have a worse demographic bust than we are, which is impressive, because the only way that it could have come was through state control. They're trying to reverse it right now, but I'm pretty sure that their demographics are no better than ours. And there's also like reporting. Now, I think it's probably bullshit. I think that there's Chinese dissidents who just make shit up about China sometimes, but it also stands to reason that we don't have clarity on these topics. And what they were saying was that the baby bust is so bad that we calculate the Chinese population at 1.2 billion, and they think it's closer to 500 million as a result of the disastrous one-child policy. And if you look at their policies in the early 20th century, like, it's a stretch, but it's not that big of a stretch.
That was a claim by a deluded social media woman.
I'm sure they're crazy.
I hope she gets imprisoned for this statement, for this lie about the Chinese people.
Okay,
no, the population of China.
So you're saying you would actually prefer an authoritarian society in which political dissidents are just thrown into jail or prison, and you think that freedom is a disease where people slowly kill and destroy themselves in the name of libertine hedonism?
I was kind of joking, but within the mindset and the framework of Chinese society, I really don't care. She lied, and she made up these numbers.
Okay, let me press you a little bit. If we have the options between mixed capitalism and liberalism as it presently exists within Europe and the United States, and then you're not going to be in control. You're just going to be a peasant. You're going to be another working class stooge. Okay, you're not going to be the guy who's in charge of society. Then Same thing in China, where you do have these authoritarian concerns that I've said. So, for instance, like if you shut up, if you don't challenge the government, if you just work your job, you know, hang out with your wife or whatever, you're probably going to be fine. Okay, you'll probably be fine. But if you talk shit about the government, if you have the wrong religion, if you come from the wrong culture, if you have the wrong ethno-religious heritage, then you can be incarcerated, forced out of your culture by the force of the state, and then ultimately disappeared or killed. Like, which system do you prefer?
Well, I appreciate the thought experiment. That is extremely interesting because I am a libertarian. I love liberty. I'm an American, North American. I'm a Canadian, of course. And I love liberty. However, I reject some of the premises in your question. I reject the idea, for example, that we are a liberal society. I believe that we are not a liberal society. We claim to be. But when you look at how we treat questions of human rights, like fathers' rights in North America, don't exist. And when you look at how the censorship era applied into America and Europe, and the whole quest against misinformation and the denial of free competitive rights over Twitter, over YouTube, we are not a liberal society. We have the exact same behavior as the Chinese. It's just that we have a blind spot on some of these things, and we don't live by the standards that we claim to live. That being
I don't
said,
think this is true though, because in the state of Florida, as an example, divorce laws basically dictate that as long as the father isn't abusive or an alcoholic or a
and there you
murderer or
go.
a rapist, then you actually have 50-50 split custody of the children. Then
And
also, well,
what
I
is
just
the
wanted
threshold? What is the threshold for someone to be declared abusive? A claim by a woman.
well,
That's
that's
the
probably
problem.
true. But anyways, the other thing that I wanted to say though is that social media thing where you're saying, oh, we're just like China, we're as authoritarian as them, et cetera, et cetera. That's not true. We had a cabal, we had a private joint interest of liberals and progressives who felt like they needed to push the zeitgeist in a liberal and progressive direction. And then they were extremely authoritarian in the way they conducted themselves on social media. But all it took was a rich billionaire to buy Twitter and effectively rip the Overton window wide open. He didn't need, like, the only permission that he needed from the state was whether or not the transaction was legal. But he didn't need permission from the state in reference to what kind of content he was going to permit on his platform. And as a result, you have the entire Overton window being yanked back rightward because of the actions of a private citizen. That kind of political, cultural course correction would not have been possible in China, because if they felt like the zeitgeist was going in the right direction, then they would have continued down that direction and prohibited the sale of a social media website to change the cultural narrative. That's one of the interesting things about free societies, is we can course correct even as private citizens.
Well, maybe we, not Europe, because Europe is headed toward banning precisely this course correction. That being said, I want to engage with your experimental thinking, even if I reject some of the premises. I think I might be safer for the continuation of my genetic descent in a Chinese-like society than I am in Texas, for example. I think that when you say we've been making babies, the fact is different people than those who founded America have been making babies. The fact is that we have allowed in this supposedly liberal society essentially an invasion happening in open sky through our government's lack of care on surveying the border. And we find ourselves with a completely changed demographic in America, which doesn't bode well going forward into the next 100 years. It's very easy to see how Texas will one day be Mexico.
Just
are
quick,
you and I,
just because the audience is curious, they're trying to, big picture wise, can you help refresh anybody who just came in terms of how it ties back to Israel and whether or not the U.S. should cut ties?
well, yeah, sorry if we're going a little wild with it, but I do think that this is probably the crux of what JF is getting at. So I think I could try to tie it. Okay. Nations. When people use the word nation, I don't conceptualize a country or a state. I think of a nation as something different. I think of nation as a people. And so what's interesting about the United States is that we have a civic nationalist, liberal, libertarian framework, effectively saying that if you believe in these ideas, then you are an American. But a lot of people who are ethno-nationalists, race realists, whatever you want to call them, they're saying that this is a mirage that has been pulled all over our eyes in order to make us like complacent economic productive units. And so the argument is that Israel, which does have a positive birth rate, it's like one of 3 countries on the planet besides Mongolia that has a positive birth rate, that effectively through the Jewish population within the United States, they're manipulating the United States of America to be economic debt slaves. They're warriors. The American empire, even as much as it is self-serving, and it does make Americans trillions and billions of dollars. That was going to be another point that I was going to make. But the point is that like these billions and trillions of dollars, as much as they might benefit Americans, they're also to the benefit of the state of Israel. And if this was any other nation, if they had not been holocausted, if they had not been massacred during World War II, we wouldn't give them this level of national deference. That's the argument that I think JF is kind of poking at. But I did want to push him on immigration in the United States.
Before you move on to your next point, I want to answer the gentleman's question. We are talking about China and America because ultimately down the line, what we have is there is an Israeli empire birthing. And it all goes back to Israel, even when we talk about China versus America, because Israel is trying to build an empire that will be the main force in the old continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia. Israel, for this, recruits America. And Israel's biggest enemy, even if they will never say it explicitly, is China. So they go after Iran, who is collaborating with China for gas, for other industries. They go against Venezuela, absolutely. So all of this ultimately is a war of empire between China and Israel, and who will be the leading force rising in the next 100 years on the old continents as an alternative and as a complement to the American empire. This is why when we talk about China tonight, you're ultimately talking about the opposite of the American-Israeli empire.
Yeah, and sorry, if I know this might be like really highfalutin for you. What the argument is, though, that I'm making, and I kind of want to get into the concepts of nations momentarily because I think it's important for the way that we're having this conversation. But what I'm saying is that there is parallel interest between the civic nationalism of the United States, which I do not believe to be an illusion. I think it's as real as any social construct that has been constructed over the past several millennia, and our involvements in the Middle East and North Africa. And we could get into specific geopolitical stuff, but JF basically said that all of our entanglements in the Middle East and North Africa are exclusively to the benefit of, you might not have said exclusively, but you said that was substantially to the benefit of Israel. Whereas I can go back and say, hey, these are Americans. These are Christians. These are people who have independent wealth and independent money. And they also thought that this military adventurism in the Middle East and North Africa was to America's benefit. I can point to the oil. I can point to the resources. I can point to the wealth that's generated inside the United States of America. And I can say, this is not solely to the benefit of Israel. This is also to the benefit of the average American. And I think that this is where people are quick to basically just say, oh, well, you're talking about Jews and you're talking about international relations between Israel and the United States. You're an anti-Semite. I don't need to use the invective to dismiss the conversation. I would just rather have the conversation.
Well, I think what you point out, there are certain Americans who feel that they have benefited from this American imperialism. I would say no doubt, no doubt. The problem is that the American empire splits who gains and who doesn't gain. So what do we have to gain when we get into these wars? Well, we have to gain the petrodollar defense, the idea that all of the economic activities of these countries must serve the USD in some form, must use the USD for oil transactions, or must be integrated to the American or Israeli economy in a serving way. That is certainly giving value to the dollar. The question is it fair? Is it just? Should other nations be slaves economically that enrich some white guy in a trailer park because he happens to use the USD too. That is nonsensical. And secondly, about the USD, the USD is being kept by a thread by this system of invasion and war. In other words, even with those inflation and with those injustices that we've perpetrated across the Middle East, the USD is still a very inflated currency that still is being controlled by the Fed and which ultimately enriches the people who benefit from the stock market expansions, or the people who have big wealth, basically. The people who have small savings are actually punished by having the USD in their bank account because everything is made to inflate, and ultimately it's those people with assets that are growing. So no doubt there is an elite that is benefiting from the wars, and then there is even a quasi-elite in the middle class of American society that is kind of taking a piece of the pie. And there is definitely the soldiers like you who are benefiting from the system, who make it a job to be serving the American empire. But down the line, what matters to me is morally and economically. Does it make sense? Is it just? Or will there be justified hatred in the rest of the world against America down the line in 10 years, 50 years from now, where people will say America has been evil?
Well, I mean, I think we're already there. But I also think that there's a great quote from Joe Biden, and I'm sure that he's quoting somebody else. But it's don't call me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And so I think that's why neoconservatives appeal to the moral bankruptcy of or lack of individualism that's inside China. I think that's why they appeal to Russian kleptocracy and oligarchy. The reason why they appeal to that is because they say, oh, well, we are competing with these other rival empires on the world stage. And so therefore, do you want us or do you want them? And I know that you're a libertarian, but at the same time, I think that power abhors a vacuum. And I think the state is a necessary evil. And I think that if you look at the early 20th century, effectively what happens with American isolationism is that Eurasia eats itself. It's what it does. Like there's so many nations, there's so many people, there's so many different interests, there's so many control for resources that in absence of a bully, like a Leviathan, Eurasia just routinely eats itself. And so the stability, I understand that like whether or not, people are going to hate, everybody hates cops. People hate good cops. People hate good cops because they're cops. They're going to give you a citation. They're going to jam you up if you commit a murder or if you commit a rape or something like that. And that's something to be resented and feared. But that doesn't mean that the job of a police officer, just because people don't like you, suddenly becomes socially unnecessary. Nor do I argue that a balance of power within Eurasia dictated by a strong but comparatively just power is necessary. And I think that if you look at the society, so for instance, like, in Saudi Arabia, let's use Saudi Arabia as a very specific example, okay? Saudi Arabia in the early 1990s or something like that, it had an unemployment rate around like 30% for young men. And the profit that you're talking about, where the profit is extracted to social elites and then sent overseas, was totally correct. And I believe that like bred the kind of resentment that led to jihadist terrorism that ultimately resulted in the USS Cole bombing and 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. Well, what happened was since 9/11, Saudi Arabia has said, okay, having unmarried, poor, radicalized young men is bad for everyone. And so as a result, they reoriented their economy. And I could check it right now, but I think I checked it in like 2012. And they'd gotten their employment under 10%. Now, 10% isn't good, but it's 2/3 less than during the environment that bred the terrorism of the war on terror era. And so my point to you is that American relationships with, and also with Saudi Arabia, we obviously had like the madrasas and not Salafists, I forget, but the hardcore guys, the Wahhabists. We had the Wahhabist madrasas going overseas because the old king thought that religious conservatism was a huge thing. Well, now we have a new king, and the king is a reformer, and he's a modernist, and he's still a Muslim, or at least he pretends to be, but he's still moving Saudi Arabia in a more modern direction. And I don't think if you took an isolationist perspective where you said, well, we can't deal with anybody because they're all morally inferior and fucked up, But if you also took the perspective that they're just expressing their ethnogenesis, they're just expressing their culture through their means, then you wouldn't have this pressure that is slowly reforming and modernizing Saudi Arabia in line with American ideals.
Well, Saudi Arabia is a case that is basically being held by a lot of money. If you look at other places in the Middle East and North Africa, they would require much more investment to recreate this little bubble that you've described accurately for Saudi Arabia. That is not doable everywhere, and that is only doable at a price, really. And it happens to work in Saudi Arabia because there's an oil economy to begin with, and then there's lots of subversive forces that pass through money and grants and kind of desire to collaborate with Saudi Arabia that makes it possible. I don't question the fact that Saudi Arabia is a stable society that is headed in a correct direction. Now, look at Libya, you're going to have a whole other story. So in general, really, the case that you've been making is about the need for a force and a police, which I agree with in principle. I'm kind of a minarchist where there will be at the bottom of society a need for some degree of police, therefore some degree of state, therefore some degree of laws. But to jump from there and to say, therefore, the actions that we do are justified, like when we genocide the Gazans, I think that is mistaking two different issues, which is the meta question of should there be an authority, and the actual question in pragmatism of are we a good authority? My problem is more with the second one, which is we have clearly not been fair to the Gazans. We have clearly.
I appreciate you acknowledging the first, and yeah, let's move into that.
All right. So, I mean, I don't even know what's your position about.
Yeah,
Gaza
let me highlight it. So I would say I'm a tepid Zionist, and if I was a dictator, I would force a two-state solution. Like if you made me dictator for a day, basically Gaza's walled off, they're developed, there's a highway that goes to the West Bank, the West Bank gets frozen, there's some power sharing and territorial sharing agreement between the Israelis and the Arab Palestinians or Muslims, and we basically figure it out from there. However, I don't think that that's what the Zionists are interested in. Okay, I don't think that they're interested in, and unfortunately, I don't think the West Bankers or the Gazans are interested in it either. And so effectively, if you talk to militant Gazans, which I think there's plenty of them, they want the entire thing. They want any Jews who remain to be under Muslim control because it was their territory. That's the correct ordination from their religion. And basically from the river to the sea, Palestine needs to be free. Okay. And then if you also talk to West Bankers, they typically have a pretty similar attitude. I'm sure there's chill West Bankers. I'm sure there's chill people in Gaza, maybe not so much anymore. But the truth is, like, I'm sure there are peaceable people who just want to live with their neighbors. But I'm also sure that if you poll most people, they'll say, what's your ideal? And it would be a unified state under Arab Muslim control with Jews as a tolerated minority. And then if you talk to the Israelis don't want that at all. The Israelis effectively want control of Gaza. They want, if they could, they would probably just ethnically cleanse Gaza and push those people into the Sinai. And then same thing with the West Bank. It's like if you're a chill Arab Muslim Palestinian and you're willing to be 10 to 20% of the Israeli population and be economically productive and you're nice and you're not a terrorist, they're probably going to tolerate you. But if you're somebody who actually wants, the return of the state of Palestine from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, they want you fucking gone too. And they'll do whatever they can in order to slowly push people out of the West Bank. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But I think my frustration with the constant calls of like genocide. The last time that I checked casualty stats was probably October of last year, where it was reported that there were 70,000 direct deaths. There was an estimate of 200,000 indirect deaths that were going to happen over the course of like malnutrition, poor sanitation, et cetera, et cetera. That still hasn't been verified. And then basically the population of Gaza is 2.2 million. And I go to research the casualty stats, and the casualty stats are still the same a year later. If we're comparing this to the Holocaust, if we're comparing this to a genocide, then it shouldn't be 70,000 direct deaths out of a population of 2.2 million. It should be half the fucking population, or it should be 2/3, or they should be kicked out into the Sinai. But that's not what's happening.
Well, we can talk about the numbers and all. Well, I think first that you are mistaken in rejecting indirect death, because first when you consider historical sources on the Holocaust, they will include indirect death that come from psychiatric reasons, internment in hospitals, malnutrition, and some of this will all participate to the final count. So I think you are applying a double standard here. But in general, to justify why do I call it a genocide? Well, I will say first that it's not because a genocide isn't fully successful that it isn't that. An attempt at a genocide that doesn't get to 100% of the population killed is still a genocide in my terminology. Secondly, there's the subtleties of the distinction between ethnic cleansing and genocide. But by the definition of ethnic cleansing that is used by international institutions, an ethnic cleansing includes the fact of creating circumstances that lead to the death of the people or that lead to its disappearance in the place in which they live. So if I was to take everyone from Canada and I move them by force to, I don't know, Russia, and then I repopulate Canada with say Hispanics or Mexicans, I would have committed an ethnic cleansing of Canada, even if I didn't kill a single Canadian.
Sure, but then I think that's where we get into the definitions of nation people, where actually we kind of moved away from that point about 20 minutes ago, but I kind of want to return to it, okay? So I think that you included, and James and everyone in my chat, most of them anyways, are human, and we're part of the same species. And that's evidenced by the fact that we can procreate, almost across all races, all ethno-religious groups, et cetera, et cetera. And so while obviously there can be differences in people, that doesn't mean that we are like, I don't know, like an ant is still an ant, right? Like especially if there's like a cross pollination between different species of ants. Ants are, or maybe species is the wrong word, but if an ant can procreate with another ant, but they're from a different tribe or whatever, that doesn't make them not ants, even if they go to war on occasion. Okay. And what's weird to me about the identification and attempt at defense of nation is that somehow, and I'm not saying, I would love to hear a more specific articulation from you, but somehow there are people like you who believe that Northern Europeans, Celts, Germans, Anglos, and Iberians and Lombards and all that, we're all just the same thing because we're all European. Whereas if we go back 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, there would be really stark differences. And not just that, the Europeans even today would tell you that there's stark differences between like ethno-religious and national groups, right? And so if we look at the South and Central Americans, they are Spaniards mixed with Native Americans and imported African slaves. And so as a Northern European, why would they're Spanish colonists, they're cousins. They live like 1,000 miles south. Why am I going to treat them as this like hostile, invading, genocidal force when realistically we're already cousins? Like what is this hostility?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you're touching on a super important point, which is what is identity? Is it an embedded system, and at which layer of this system do you want to identify based on the pragmatism of your situation? So I'll give you a very straight answer to your question. I identify as white in the global planet Earth because I am part of a minority as white European, which is a minority that is reducing its numbers overall on planet Earth. And to me, it doesn't matter whether, even at this point, I kind of feel Russian, I kind of feel Swedish, I kind of feel Spanish, all at the same time, because in the big scheme of planet Earth, we are reducing our populations, and we are faced with other populations like Africans, like Asians, who are exploding in population. So I can see the
That's
future.
comparative, right?
That's
Because these
comparative.
people, because they're all trending towards 2 per
Towards what?
I forget the demographic replacement rate. There's a difference between like fertility rate and another term, and one is measured by like 1,000 lives births, and then there's like one that's measured by the individual woman. I think it's fertility rate is what I'm referring to. And so demographic replacement rate is 2.15 like kids per woman on average or whatever, whereas I think America as a whole is 1.55. I think you mentioned earlier that that's buoyed by Hispanics, for instance. Like Hispanics have a higher average birth rate than Northern European whites. But at the same time, like once again, for me, I have 2 kids, you know what I'm saying? And if God will bless me, maybe I'll have a third, you know? So I did my part for, you know, the whites, so to speak. But at the
I consider below 5, you've just maintained yourself.
Okay. But at the same time, the point is that that's difficult. But we're also making conscious choices in reference to like procreation and condoms and all that kind of stuff. And so as a result, in the material circumstance in which we are, as we see other societies, as we see other continents enrich themselves, I don't see like a Jewish conspiracy to enslave and decrease the population of the Goyim. I see industrialization, contraception, and material well-being in a multivariate analysis, reducing birth rates. And then also, if you check out media from the 1970s, the panic was the opposite. The panic was that we were going to have 20 billion people, 30 billion people, and we weren't going to be able to provide for them all. And we were going to cause a cascading environmental collapse due to having too many people. And yet it seems like what's actually happening is that the population is stabilizing.
Well, you're fighting the easy straw man of a conspiracy. But I think you are rejecting, and you're rejecting the baby with the bathwater with this, because what do you talk about as explanatory causal effects onto fertility? The media. Well, precisely the media. There are elites in the media that have been deciding that this would be the coverage, that have been deciding to publish these articles that say, don't make babies, we're overpopulated, we're going to ruin the earth. And this propaganda has been going on since the 50s in the US, slowly trickling through our culture. And I don't think you can reject.
You don't think that argumentation was earnest?
No. Here's what I think. I think that if the Jews had wanted a high white birth rate, if all of AIPAC was thinking we need more whites in our society, this political problem could be resolved in a week.
Wait, but how do you explain
you'd have white American politicians saying, please, AIPAC, please help me. And AIPAC would tell them, you're going to produce me millions of white babies next year. And this problem would be resolved. And it never happened in the like 60 years of AIPAC-controlled American politics.
Okay,
and
but,
so
but
I'm
how
not
does that
saying
explain
it's
other
a conspiracy.
countries?
I'm not saying there are some hateful people deciding that will make a few amounts of babies. But I'm saying there is a blind spot in having an American elite that ultimately has no skin in the game in the American white demographic.
Well, hold on. The question that I'm asking that I kind of want you to deal with is like, how is this explanatory for the entire world, though? Because if we go to Russia, if we go to Eastern Europe, if we go to Western Europe, if we go to North America, if we go to South America, if we go to Central America, even if we go to Africa, even if we go to the Middle East and North Africa, which have some of the highest birth rates in the world, the trend, like I'm pretty sure that Africa as a whole is at like 4, right? Per like four per woman or something like that, whatever the fertility rate is. But at the same time, the trend, if you look at 150 years ago, the average was like 11. So that's already like a 60 or 70% cut in the fertility rate. And not just that, like with contraception, with, AIDS prevention organizations like PEPFAR and USAID, with all this stuff, it's all trending towards 2. And I swear to God, I think I looked at it. The only 2 places that have a positive birth rate, weirdly enough, are like Israel, but they're trying to, they feel like they're in existential pressure They feel like in an existential pressure cooker that they're at constant threat. And so they need more people in order to help deal with the threat, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case.
Well, hold on. We're not done yet. Mongolia.
Well, you made my case for me.
Well, I don't think that was the case at all, but that's why we should cut off aid to Israel.
Just a note before you continue, what I perceive and what you've been saying.
Yeah.
You have initiated a comparative worldwide analysis, and you have found an exceptional case. And of all the hundreds of countries in this world, the exceptional case happens to be in Israel.
Yeah, but the exceptional case, but hold on. The exceptional case is also Mongolia, right? And like, I don't think there's a lot of Jews in Mongolia, and I don't think there's a lot of Jewish propaganda in Mongolia, and I think the Mongolians probably just like to fuck. So like, you know, they're also like accepting themselves from the rule.
The difference is if you look at Asian populations, people often quote Japan. They are overpopulated, so there's a natural cycle that they've reached, where having more babies is not necessary. They have overpopulated their area. So it's very different. The fact that there's high birth rate in Israel, low birth rate in the white population of the US, and low birth rate in Japan, those are three distinct phenomena. And some of them are not worrying. It's not worrying that there's low birth rate in Japan because it will self-correct and they already buffered their whole land to full. It's very worrying that the white American demographics isn't breeding more because it means immediate replacement, and our elites are making sure that this replacement happens faster than nature would want it.
Well, hold on. So let's run this. Well, let's run this thing down to ground, though. Okay. So a century from now, let's say that we've established peace in the Middle East and North Africa to the point that Israel no longer feels under threat, and then their population drops to a certain degree. Hold on. And then let's also say that the Hispanic population, the Black population, the Middle Eastern North African population, all the other populations drop to not an existential crisis. These kinds of people are not going to disappear from the face of the planet, but the how would I phrase this? The dinks, the dual income, no kids people are going to end their generations, but the typically conservative people who do have multiple children, they're going to propagate and continue. And there will be a natal core to each kind of human being on the planet who's going to perpetuate. And so that's the thing. I think we're going to like burn off the chaff. We're going to burn off like the wheat and the chaff or whatever. We're going to burn off the chaff of the human species, but they're going to do it in probably the most peaceful way possible. So if you were referring to the mass immigration and the demographic replacement of the northern North America as being constructed by this, you said don't call it a conspiracy because it's more complex than that. But by these demographic trends or whatever, what's still going to end up happening is it would have been like the most peaceful involuntary suicide in the history of human affairs. Because all these dinks, all these dual income, no kids, I talk to them all the time. I'm like, hey, you should have some fucking kids. It's the best thing I've ever done. Regardless of anything that happens in my personal life, having kids was the most amazing thing I've ever done. It's a beautiful, miraculous part of life. And yet what the dinks say is like, no, I want to have dogs. I want to have cats. I want to play video games. I want to hang out. I want to smoke weed. I want to do DoorDash, you know? And so like, can we really compare that as this like nefarious conspiracy when the other nefarious conspiracies of the planet are walking up with a pistol and shooting you in the back of the head? Like the nefariousness is markedly different, observably different, I would say.
Well, you're raising an interesting angle. Does the white liberal deserve what's happening to them? Because ultimately they choose it in a very clear way. I would not necessarily disagree with that analysis. What I think people don't realize is the extent to which America will not be white in 100 years. I don't know that people realize that 99% of the surface of this country, you will not be able to go to this gentrified white neighborhood. And if you do, it's because you'll be a multi-millionaire and perhaps billionaire then. What people don't seem to realize is that, okay, yes, to an extent, the non-reproductive, anti-natalist liberal woman has declared her own death contract, has signed in blood, and has accepted her fate. But down the line, what that means is Hispanics, blacks everywhere. And the US then will be an empire with the power having been achieved by white technology and Jewish billionairism and messing with the APAC politics and all, but it will be down the line an empire of brown people. And
I know,
good
but
luck,
this is
good luck buying a house in North Dakota.
but this is my frustration with this whole line of thinking, though, is that if we looked at the history of Europe, okay, there's a series of like existential crises, right? Like the Scandinavian invasions or the Norman invasions of England and northern France, like the Lombards being pushed into northern Italy, or the Moorish invasions of Spain, et cetera, et cetera. Also the Reconquista, I should mention, but also like the Germanic invasion of Italy. And so if you were those people at the time, if you were a Roman who had seen the collapse of the Roman Empire, then you would be like, this is the worst thing ever. This is the apocalypse. Everything I know and loved has totally fallen apart into the hands of these barbarians. And yet what was born out of that was arguably some of the greatest things that have ever come out of human society. And who was it done by? The people who were considered to be barbarians at the time. So like for as an example, I am like 98%. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I am majority Irish, small amount of English, small amount of German and Czech. Okay. And so as a result, if you looked at it, the German and Czechoslovakian peoples were barbarians in the Roman Empire. The English people were the backwater shithole of Europe for centuries or millennia. The Celts, the people who were in Ireland, they were considered backwater savages by the English. And so I am a relatively intelligent backwater savage profiting off of the technology of these ancient dead civilizations. And yet I'm still here. And so you're saying, oh, these barbarians, they're at the gates, they're going to destroy us all. And it's like, probably not, man. We've done this like a million times throughout the history of our human species.
That is a very interesting historical parallel, but to do it properly, we need to understand the difference now. The difference is there were no planes then, and the barbarians that you described, they weren't so different than the Romans, really. They had cultural differences.
Ask a Roman, but sure.
But genetically, they were that distance. Now we are faced with a world of planes, of international travel, and ultimately, what we have to realize is that temperature on this globe determines a lot about where people can survive based on their genetics. And the American empire is simply misplaced strategically. Ultimately, Europe stayed white because it was cold enough to push back the waves of Africans. And you can put the responsibility on some of our weapons and technology. Sure, it all participated. But down the line, Europe isn't brown because it's cold. Now, with modern heating, with technology, that truth becomes more and more hanging by a thread every year. And what we realize is that America is a quite southern nation. I mean, there are places in America like southern Florida that are effectively as close to the equator as North Africa. And so what you have to realize is that the American empire was built by white, probably in a too much of a southern place, because whites had a special access to boat access to colonize this region where non-whites didn't. However, with time, what you will have, given the international travel possibility, is you will have a complete destruction of the demographic basis in a way that you'll never see in Rome, or that you wouldn't have seen in Rome 1,000 years ago. Because 1,000 years ago, there were limits on genetic spreading due to the difficulty of travels and the cold. These difficulties are becoming more and more abolished by modern technology, which will make the American empire entirely a brown empire like India too in 100 years from now.
Let me just quick jump in. Just as a quick summary, just because we've covered a lot of ground, would you guys be willing to maybe just steelman in a couple sentences each other's position, just so we know that we're on the same page?
Yeah. So I I think that JF sees the world as a series of competing nations. Sorry if I straw man you, but I'll do my best. That Israel and the Jewish contingent of people inside the United States are interested in the Zionist project and the furthering of the Jewish nation, which is an identifiable people with its own goals. And that I am a deluded fool because I am a civic nationalist who believes that a Hispanic person, a Black American, a Jewish American, an Arab Muslim American, as long as they subscribe to these highfalutin ideals, then they're my brothers in the American empire. But actually, I'm a rube, and what's being happened is Israel is fleecing the United States economically. It's manipulating us into wars in the Middle East and North Africa. It's convincing us to alter our own demographics for the worse. And we're paying them to do it because we have been so sufficiently manipulated by these narratives that we're prisoners of our own illusions.
It's a fair description, although I don't think you're a fool. I think you're a very intelligent man. I've appreciated this debate. And to Steelman, your position, I would say down the line, you see your interest as part of the multicultural, multiracial American empire as a dominant interest in the relationship with Israel. You think that Israel is your outpost. You think that the comments I do about Israeli control of politics are not big enough for you to worry about, or they are small issues, but you can see yourself above it, and you can see yourself benefiting from having this Middle Eastern outpost as an outpost of your American multicultural empire in a vision of the world in which you are trying to be better than China, and in which you define these nations as competing enemies.
That's like a perfect summary of my position.
I'm going to jump in really quick. Are there any last ideas that you guys want to cover before we do?
Actually, there is something that I wanted to ask about. So, from an analogy standpoint, okay, let's use the Roman Empire real quick. The Roman Empire controlled Southern Europe and Central Europe, and arguably all the way up to England and North Africa and all that kind of stuff. It was a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multilinguistic empire. And what ended up happening was during the collapse, there were these like effete, elite Italian rulers who refused to learn Greek, refused to deal with the Slavs, like the Slavic armies that they themselves had to hire to protect the empire. They looked down on the generals. They looked down on the consuls. They saw them as these peasants who were protecting their interest in the safe little bubble of like central Rome. But as a result of treating their allies as their enemies, as their expendable cannon fodder, effectively all they did is they accelerated the downfall of the ideals of Rome. Whereas if they had taken a more collaborative approach where they had said, okay, maybe Rome isn't what it used to be, but we have these German generals and these Slavic generals and these Slavic politicians and these people who speak Greek, and we actually still all believe in the Republic or the ideals of the Republic or even the Empire of Rome. So we're going to band together and fight for these ideals. Maybe they couldn't have saved it at the end of the day, but it wouldn't have been such like a disastrous, horrific collapse. And I feel like that's the difference between you and me. Is I'm a barbarian who's been recruited for the empire, and I'm effectively like cannon fodder for the empire. But I'm saying that if we work together as Anglo elites, Hispanic elites, not just elites as well, even the populace. But if we treat each other as allies, then we can we have already created something beautiful, and we can create something beautiful again. Whereas you're saying, no, I'm in this tribe that is threatened within this imperial core. And as a result, I need to like suck in and defend myself. And I think you alienate a lot of people who might otherwise work with you on improving society.
Well, alliances like the ones you described, multiracial alliances, are to me, and I understand your view, but to me, they are always ultimately masks that we put on. Ultimately, there's an existential fight, and we know what happened to nations like South Africa, Haiti. There's no really coexistence possibility because the fact is all of these people on planet Earth, they really hate whites a lot. And they won't give you a chance. They might ally for you because you're too powerful for a moment. They might respect
I'm
you
powerful
because you're
and
too
I'm invited
numerous.
to the cookout and they let me say the N-word with an A when I listen to hip hop music.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I'm
But
actually in a
down the
pretty
line-
good position.
And that's because you have power and still the numbers. Now, when you're 10% of your own population, they will treat you a lot worse and you'll be victim of their crimes. And it will be stochastic terrorism, stochastic anarchism, where they will just kill some of your babies. They will mistreat your grandpa when they take care of him in the home. And down the line, it's a genocidal force that is based in hatred and that we should call out and expose and warn people that no, you won't have a happy existence as a 10% white society.
That was like the main thrust of my argument is a vague appeal to civic nationalism and collaboration. And I think JF is he's a little cynical about my idealism. That's
Yes,
what I had.
absolutely.
You got it. This is a fine time to go into the Q&A, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Folks,
I thought this was wildly interesting, but yeah, I'm down for the sake of the momentum of the show, not to drag down into autistic detail about whatever his or my geopolitical fascinations are. We would probably drag the show down that way.
You got it. This one, this one from, by the way, tomorrow, well, a couple of things. Housekeeping wise, folks, both of our guests are linked in the description box. That's including at the podcast if you listen to Modern Day Debate via podcast. And tomorrow, we are going to have a debate. Maybe it's too soon. I don't know. Some people in the chat today, I don't know. But tomorrow, Alex Pretty, whether or not he was murdered by ICE, will be tomorrow. It's going to be Alex Medeiros versus JF's old pal Destiny. He'll be back on. It feels like the old days hosting you guys back to back. So that's going to be a controversial debate. That is shown at the bottom right of your screen. So tune in for that. And then we're going to jump into these questions. But as mentioned, JF and Connor are linked in the description box, which I don't even know if I always understood, like, too soon. It's that way for debates too? I don't know.
You got to make money, bro. You got to go for it. You got to strike while the iron's hot. In 2 weeks, people are going to forget he exists.
Morbid, based, as the kids would say. This one from Chef Secret Sauce Nasty. Now, actually, there are a number of questions in here, so we might as well get through it. We're going to ask on behalf of several people. So, for example, work academics, let's see, as well as others. They say, JF, where is Mama JF?
Mama JF has not been found. She has disappeared in June 2023. So it's been 2 years and a half. The police has not found her or her body.
Okay, so those of you who have asked, I have asked it because there were like 4 people that asked. Chef Secret Sauce Nasty says, gentlemen, please, so I can keep throwing money at my favorite debate channel, please tell me your favorite pizza. Example, mine is taco pizza. It's messy. I don't know. And he's being serious. He does this every night. Mine's still pepperoni. What are your guys' favorite pizza?
I'm a Hawaiian guy. I got a restaurant in my city called Mellow Mushroom. What they do is they do a pesto base. They do chicken, they do banana peppers, they do ham, and they do pineapple. And they really like stack the banana peppers and pineapple. They also do garlic, a garlic butter drip on the crust, and then they sprinkle Parmesan and oregano onto the crust, and it is phenomenal.
Wow.
Personally, all dressed anchovy with extra anchovies with green pepper and mushroom.
Wow. Okay. I've never had anchovies. What do they call you, Franz? Anchovies? Anchovies?
By the way, If you want the sauce for pizza, that is called truff, Truff. It is a delicious, super high price, but delicious black truffle sauce for pizza with kind of a Tabasco spicy aspect to it. It is absolutely delicious. Truff plus anchovies, perfect.
Amazing. Bubble Gun says we should occupy Israel and get our money back. Wink face.
Okay.
Work Academic says
we didn't even get into WMDs, man. I was gonna bring up how we sold Iraq WMDs during the 1980s and how the Bush family and all of them and the Rumsfeld and Cheney were the architects of the Iraq war, and they set up the corporations that were going to benefit from it. I was going to talk about white Christians profiting from war. I know JF is literally saying that he would concede it because there's elites who profiteer off of war. But I would want to point that kind of stuff out for the sake of nuance.
What about the Israeli WMDs? Do they worry you?
The fact that they have nukes?
Yes.
No, I don't think they're going to use them unless their state is in like existential threat.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I think they would deploy like tactical nukes along their border in order to wipe out like troops and material. I don't think they're going to set off their nukes on random civilian centers.
You got it. This one from Work Academic says, okay, we got that one. Duvid says, God bless JF, 10 years later, still regularly arguing against Zionism, winning or losing the battle. Keep up the great works.
Much love to Duvid, a Jewish man who was appearing on my show back in the days.
Wow. Duvid, I think we've had him. Good to see you, Duvid. And also, he said, are you winning or losing the battle, JF?
I think we've had a very enriching conversation. I'm very interested about some of the historical understanding of counterpoint. I think he sees the world as kind of a soldier, as a barbarian, as he self-defined. And that's interesting to me. Definitely not my position, but I love to hear about it.
I think that JF is a controversial figure that a lot of people criticize openly in the world, but I don't think anyone can knowingly call him stupid. And as a matter of fact, like he did create some of like the best Surfs TV content ever created, where like Surfs TV just shows up and he's like, "You're a eugenicist," and you're like, "Yeah." Yeah, that was a wild internet debate moment.
Work Academic says CP counterpoints. Would you go camping without supplies or a phone? And have you seen Bear Grylls? Would you let your wife try it? I think this is basically going back to.
Okay, I would not let my wife go camping with Bear Grylls, even though he's a mousy small man. I still don't trust him, and survivalist instincts are. I think women find that attractive. Would I go camping without basic supplies as long as I thought I had a good game plan and to survive off of the land for a short amount of time? Yeah.
Big League Drew says, from Prophet of Men, how can Israel be considered the U.S. best ally if they have not helped us militarily and sell the military information we quote unquote give them to China?
So, parsing this apart, I would never say best ally. Okay. I would never say best ally. I would actually have to come up with criteria for the best ally on the planet and then evaluate it. Because I think like England and Australia and New Zealand and Tonga have done cool things for us. Whereas Israel has done cool things for us, but it's always for a price. And there's always like a geopolitical consideration. So I think like an ally would be willingly giving without consideration, that kind of thing. In reference to the military tech, it's my understanding that there was some military tech that was backdoored to China, but I would blame the actors involved in that case. I wouldn't blame the entirety of the state. And then there was another question. Can you read it again? Just because there was another thing that I wanted to bring up that's actually kind of nuanced.
Yes. They said, how can Israel be considered the U.S. best ally if they have not helped us militarily and sell
helping us militarily? You think it's bad to have Cather, disbelieving Christian alcoholics covered in tattoos, waging war in the Middle East and North Africa? The only thing that would cause more anger and upset in the Middle East and North Africa would be Israeli troops. And those Israeli troops, if they were, not only would they be like intentionally targeted and massacred effectively by any majority Muslim country that they partook in military operations in, but if they were captured, the level of torture that they would experience would be the most heinous shit you've ever seen in your entire life. So I actually think that the IDF not participating in the war on terror is actually a net good.
This one coming in, do appreciate it. Big Drew says YouTube, or says YouTube won't even let me ask my questions. Let that sink in. Chef,
they're probably
secret
spicy.
sauce. Nasty says, I am a chef of the secret sauce. It tastes amazing, but the ingredients are nasty. What are your three guys' favorite salad? I don't really have a favorite salad. I have a favorite salad dressing. I know it's Caesar's, but what are your guys' favorite types of salad?
Yeah, right, Caesar or honey mustard.
Right now, what I do is hard-boiled egg, tuna, and feta cheese, olives, radishes, short slices, cucumber, lettuce, and then I love many vinaigrettes are good with this. Sun-dried is good, Caesar is good, but it's I eat a lot of salads right now because I've been losing 55 pounds.
Wow, good for you. Big League Drew says, is the mayor in Miami sending police to people's houses over tweets criticizing him a good use of taxpayer money and public servants?
Absolutely not.
This one from Duvid says, I agree with JF. I like the Chinese. I went to top universities and hardworking, mostly honest Chinese students beat me fair and square, peace and love. And yeah. I think earlier they were asking, how is the battle, JF, going more broadly? And in particular, referring to arguing against Zionism.
Oh, well, I think that anti-Zionism has made itself a place on the public space that it almost lost. We almost got completely eliminated from the internet. And it kind of came back in a wave in the last year or two under Elon Musk's Twitter. I think it has also peaked, and we're going to go back down in terms of, I think we have to move on from just talking about this. But I've made it a large part of my career to make this subject acceptable to talk about in a mature way and in a way that doesn't get you social punishment. So I'm very happy about where we are.
Yeah, I'll say that even my experience in public discourse I've really been like talking on the internet since like 2019. The talking points 6 years ago to the talking points 2 years ago or now, I suppose. Now it's you couldn't even talk about like being anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-APAC, anti any of that kind of stuff without paying some kind of social consequence. Whereas now people are having like pretty deep conversations about like, what's the nature of our relationship with this foreign nation state? Is the lobbying too aggressive? Are our congressmen using religious pretexts in order to gain political favor? What are the optics of this? Should we be participating in the West Bank and Gaza? And so I still try to differentiate, but I try to differentiate between like anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Because if somebody is opposed to the nation state of Israel and their slow annexation of the West Bank and Gaza, and also the birth of the nation that kind of caused a lot of death and displacement, then I view that as inherently different as viewing every Jewish person as like this Machiavellian mustache twirling villain that must be defeated. And I'll even differentiate that compared to JF's thing of like, nations are self-interested bodies of people who advocate in their self-interest, and we should think about who are we as people and what are we interested in. While I think a lot of people would probably call that anti-Semitic or definitely anti-Zionist, I still think that it's a concept at least worth contemplating and even asking yourself.
You got it. This one from Tuxedo Mask. Oh, got that one already. And Bigly Drew says, CP, interesting initials. They say, do you know, he's not a pervert. He's a very normal man. They say, do you keep deflecting to other countries because you can't defend your position?
No, I think I can defend it just fine. I think that I think I looked up the national GDP of Israel. We didn't even get to that talking point. We didn't even get that far. But effectively, like the $4 billion annual, JF brought up that it was like $300 billion or whatever. I was going to ask over the course of what time. My understanding is that it's approximately $4 billion, $3.8 billion that we give Israel annually. And if you look at that on an annual basis, the GDP of Israel is around like 542 billion. So the $4 billion we give them is 0.7% of the GDP. So if we cut them off from our financial assistance, even if we cut them off from Jordanian and Egyptian assistance, which I think we do for stability, I think that's what we do. I think we give the elites in the government in those countries a few $1 billions and we say, hey, keep it quiet. Don't attack each other. We'll also give you cool military shit. Chill the fuck out. So it costs us about $10 billion to keep the region stable, which is a cost. But when you look at how much of the resources and civilizational advantage and intelligence advantage that we derive from the region, $10 billion is like a very small price to pay. And once again, if we cut that off entirely, it would be 0.7% of the Israeli GDP. And so it's not this like existential thing where you have like this vampire, like, sucking blood out of you and you're dying. It's more like a mosquito bite in the realm of things.
You got it. This one from Big League Drew says, this is me paying James in blood-free money. Did CP receive the 7K yet? Is the 7K real?
I've offered for Ukrainian intelligence and Mossad to enter into my DMs. So far, they have refused. All of my Ukrainian shilling and all of my Israeli shilling thus far has been for free.
I've been receiving money from Jeff Epstein, but for the last few years, the money hasn't been coming in. I don't know what happened to him.
Unfortunately, I know the deep cut reference on that one.
JF, is there anything real about the 7K, or is this just baloney?
Oh, it's absolutely real. Israel has come out publicly and has went to recruit creators. Tim Pool is one of them. They are ready to pour money into American culture to control talking points. And we literally have some people on Instagram, like small political creators or big creators, but that are generally not political, who are taking in the 7,000 and just making a speech about how they love Israel.
Okay, so it's 7,000. I was under the impression it was like 7,000 that had to be used for a trip to Israel, and then like, oh, okay. It's
the
just
trip
7,
to Israel is different. That's been happening since 15 years. They will invite you. They will bring you to some touristic area, and then they will get into your hotel room and put some viruses on your laptop. They did that to Congressman, what's his name, Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz has reported that publicly.
This is insane. I heard that before. Also, so you're saying that they would say, here's $7,000, just make a nice speech about us. Because normally when I heard of the $7,000, I think, Tim Pool, and I'm thinking that guy's got 35,000 live viewers a night. So I'm thinking he's probably
he makes a shitload of cash and he doesn't need it, but he still took it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't know about the Israeli shit, but obviously he was hooked up with Tenet Media. That was Lauren Chen's, psychological operation where there were Russians using shell companies to launder hundreds of thousands of dollars to him, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern, I'm actually, I would say, relatively speaking, internet friends with. Her biggest regret is that according to her, she didn't know it was the Russians. And number two, she didn't get anywhere near as much money as everybody else. So she's kind of regretting not asking for more. But like the national level psychological operations to shift the narratives around American geopolitics are real. And I'm not surprised that Qatar, Israel, Russia, China are playing these games. I'm not surprised at all.
Really? This is wild. But I could get, 7,000 for a speech in a streamed, while you're streaming at home. I could see maybe then someone taking it, because I was just thinking to get 7,000
And a
to go
free
to Israel.
and a free trip to Israel if they offer, man. That'd be you know, you get to go to the wall, you know, you get to see like things that are referenced in the Bible. You get to see like the, you know, the birthplace and living area of Jesus of Nazareth. Like it is a big deal.
This one from Duvid says counterpoints just running. B grade Hasbara talking points. JF crushing with style. Okay. Let's see. Tuxedo Mass says checkmate. JF wins. I don't know if you want to respond to these or not. So Jack
Thank you very much.
says a demographic replacement is ethnocide. Yay or nay?
I get frustrated with this conversation. Okay. The reason why I get frustrated is because like ethnocide, side often means killing. I forget if it's Greek or Latin or whatever. So then the kind of question is like, for me, if dinks in my chat, dual income, no kids, if they're smoking pot, ordering DoorDash, playing Nintendo DS, and then they die of old age, I think that's like a sad, I think that's like a sad life that's not pursuing virtues that I like. But at the same time, I view that much differently than people getting shot in the back of the head, which is what we're talking about in reference to the early 20th century, is just entire ethno-religious groups lined up and massacred for the crime of being a member of a different tribe. And then also, I view that differently. Sorry, there was ethnocide, genocide. Same thing with like voluntary sexual relationships that are cross-racial. So for instance, like if a rich NBA basketball player marries a blonde wife and they have mixed race children that are beautiful and intelligent and going to the best schools and all that kind of stuff, I don't view that as like the white race has been slaughtered by this voluntary mixed race couple. I view it more as like people are making different fucking choices and, you know, they got to live with them, but the human species is perpetuating and I don't give a fuck.
Basil Problem says modern day debate, a completely neutral platform for white supremacists. Guys, remember ICE is hiring. Wow. He's here all the time. Don't worry about him. Okay. Patrick Kennedy says, let's see. Although I want to have an ICE debate more broadly because we haven't.
I'd be up for this. Okay. Because I do have a subtle view on ICE. I mean, I love that they are actively trying to depart, but the methods and the aggressivity has been very demonstrative, I find, and very spectacular inducing. In the line of Trump's, he wants to display harshness, but it's not necessary harshness.
I've been pissing off my chat for the past 2 weeks about ICE shootings. So, you know, if you invite me, I'll be there, but I'm going to pay a price.
Wow. This one from Patrick Kennedy. Every battle between animals is a battle of genes expressing themselves. It's time we realized our own genes need to survive too before it's too late, Connor.
I got 2 white kids, and if God blesses me, I'll have a third. I'm doing my part. What are you doing?
Wow. Dragon Ice Lake of Fire says AI superintelligence is going to make this issue moot. You guys know what they mean by that?
I do. JF, if you want to stab at it, you can, but I'll stab at it.
I think it's a utopian vision that AI will save us and give us the strategies to live in peace. AI is extremely powerful. I'm using it every day. I love AI. But I think if you think there's a utopia, you forget the problem that conflicts exist for a reason. And it's that central authorities are taking a side one way or the other. And the AIs also are taking sides with their blind spots and their cultural making. So AI ultimately doesn't solve the problem that conflicting groups have conflicting interests. And they do not want the same central authority because that central authority will ultimately abolish one of the two groups through existential out competition.
I would say that I'm as far as the world will let me, I'm kind of like a techno-futurist. I kind of hope that technology saves us from ourselves. I don't know if it will, but my hope is that we encounter a hostile species, so we unify as a planetary species, and then we spread to our local solar system and we start mining the asteroid belt, and then we create a race of like not sentient or sapient, but like sufficiently complex artificial intelligence Boston Dynamics robots that we effectively have like slaves without a conscience. And then therefore, like, we can focus on cool things, like, you know, war and art and physical fitness and sex and all of the cool things of being a human. Meanwhile, the slave robots work the fields. So that's
So
what I'm hoping for.
Counterpoints is a racist, but just in 1,000 years from now.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm racist against sentient and I'm racist against sentient and sapient robots. That's who I'm racist against.
This one from Chef Secret Sauce Nasty says breadsticks. Do you guys have a favorite kind? I don't, with garlic. I know I like garlic.
Yeah, garlic, butter, cheese.
Huge fan of all of them. And then I do like so obviously like the Olive Garden, like the OG like white ones are good, but I think they're so bleached out that they like make my stomach upset. So I also like the long rectangular wheat ones, like with you take a brush, like a paintbrush dipped in butter with a butter slap across the top, and then oregano, Parmesan dipped into red marinara sauce. That is peak.
For a sauce, mix oil and balsamic vinegar. Absolutely delicious.
Nice. Bubblegum Gun says, we are Amalek, quote unquote. And they're saying Charlie Kirk said this. Charlie Kirk, Agartha 2026. What's that mean?
Agartha is, I mean, JF could correct me. Isn't it like the Yakubian? So Yakub is the black guy who created the white race as like white evil devils. But there's like this this like Valhalla, like this alternate plane of existence you can get to, and I think it's called Agartha.
I have no idea.
Okay, yeah, I'm like 99% sure that's what they're referencing. Is effectively like a white separate plane of existence ruled by Yakub.
You got it. This one from Big League Drew says, JF, are you a race realist as claimed by New Score 4964?
Well, I believe in race. Yes, I believe it exists.
And this one from Duvid says, considering the dangers facing humanity, revolutionary phenotype, immigration, wealth inequality, damage to environment, how dangerous is Zionism?
It's dangerous because it can take sides, and it doesn't have the same interest as us. It doesn't have skin in the game in the demographics of America. So we have to be careful. If Israel was this little ally that's a one-off outpost in the Middle East that we can use, I would be absolutely fine with this. But it's not this. We have here a competing interest within the American society.
I would say on the scale of things that I think we face as a threat, I think most people treat it like it's a top 3. I don't even know if it's like a top 50. I think we could survive with or without it.
Now, what about Erica Kirk? It seems like on Twitter, and it's wildly popular. So I'll see like 50,000 likes or 100,000 likes. Why does everyone hate Erica Kirk so much?
Well, I can do a list, I guess.
Oh, you're one of the guys putting these tweets out. JF,
no, because I've been describing this. I think it's an interesting movement of the internet, but I'm not hating on Erica Kirk. But she had bizarre behavior. She has a very weird history being linked to intelligence agencies. She's been interviewing neocons and warmongers before knowing Charlie. She's been participating to humanitarian operations based on child trafficking related stuff in Ukraine. And then she pops out of nowhere in the US and becomes the wife of Charlie Kirk. And then eventually Charlie Kirk, as he detaches himself from Zionism progressively publicly, ends up being assassinated. And she takes over TPUSA and gives it that very, very pale, centrist, pro-Zionist direction that kind of Charlie Kirk people were at least hoping he was headed away from. And so the whole story has led people to develop conspiracies that Erica Kirk is basically a secret agent who has taken out Charlie Kirk, who may have, and Candace Owen has been pushing information that suggests things in that direction. But the worst conspiracy theory is basically Erica Kirk, who was an intelligence agent who has planned the murder of Charlie Kirk, which I don't believe is correct, but I'm following this as an internet phenomenon.
For me, I would say the dissident right wing hates her because she's a Ziocon, and Charlie was drifting away from Zionism and drifting away. Like he was still gonna. Let's be real. He was still gonna support Israel. He was still gonna be friends with Ben Shapiro, all that kind of stuff. He just might not have like deep throated, the bombing of Gaza the way he was several months prior. Right? He seemed like he was drifting away from that. And then also because of Nick Fuentes and the dissident right and them having a blow up moment or whatever, it seemed like he was trying to steal some wind out of their sails by being a little bit more edgy, a little bit more contrarian, a little bit more dissident. And so he was trying to, carve some of those audience members back. So with Erica Kirk kind of taking over the ship and then becoming like a open Ziocon, neocon centrist or whatever, which I don't know if that's entirely true. I still think she's pretty MAGA. But the point is, I'll tell you what a lot of liberals and lefties get rubbed wrong with her. It's the fucking fireworks, okay? It's the fireworks at every TPUSA event. Like her husband was murdered, like 6 months ago? And she's showing up in like random like femme girl pantsuits and dancing to fucking fireworks and shit. It's kind of crazy. And like when you ask them about it, like when you ask a TPUSA member, you're like, hey, isn't it fucking crazy that your founder was murdered 6 months ago and the way you open every show is fireworks? And they're like, Charlie would have loved it. And it's like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's kind of crazy.
This is interesting. Okay. These are fascinating perspectives. I'm trying to think of, there's one I had related to it. Okay. But what about the narrative of, it really was just a crazy SJW. This wasn't like
I think that's more likely.
Okay.
Not like
the issue I take with this theory is there seems to be so many political forces that would have wanted Charlie Kirk dead. It's almost under-explanatory in terms of, like, I refuse to believe that Charlie Kirk died randomly, that this was a random event, that it could have happened 3 years before. I think that this moment was an important moment where he had a lot of pressure on his shoulder and there were way too many people who wanted him dead, that I'm like, we have to find the course of cause here. Now, I'm willing to believe that the course of cause is not a full planning by an intelligence agency, but who eventually pushed Tyler Robinson that direction? I think we still don't understand too little about this.
And for me, I'm just going to say it. The amount of like I would say that I typically would have been considered like a conservatarian libertarian 10 years ago, but I feel like the right wing has been running the Overton window more in JF's direction, more in Nick Fuentes' direction, more in the dissident direction, and even MAGA itself and Trump itself is a movement that I think has had like a lot of damage on the social fabric of the United States. And I'm saying that, and I believe that, but the liberals or the leftists, they view Charlie Kirk as enabling one of the most like evil and pernicious presidents in American history, and therefore was like a crypto fascist. And even if he himself was not like a flexible authoritarian political corporatist racist, he enabled people like that to seize power and was therefore deserving of death. And I think that was represented in the reaction to his death, where effectively like a lot of liberals were like, hey, this country has no room for political violence, but I'm also not mourning his death either. And then a lot of progressives were like, no, we're fucking happy. Fuck that guy. Like that was a lot of people's attitude.
Interesting. This one from, oh, I think we got all of those. Let me go to the standard list. Isa says, good, JF and CP. Counterpoints, what will the fallout be from this?
From the debate or what?
If the US did cut ties, what would the fallout be?
Oh, honestly, I think Israel would get even more fucking crazy. I think that the $4 billion a year, while it's not a lot, it's kind of like this, like, it's basically like a military industrial complex, like, check. Okay. So we hand them $4 billion, but then they choose what military industrial complex technology they want to purchase from American manufacturers. And so as a result, this has like impacts like, facial recognition, artificial intelligence development, robotics usage, drone usage, small arms manufacturing, tank manufacturing, anti-RPG, anti-IED technology, like all of these things. But what happens is because Israel is constantly surrounded by enemies, and also because it's almost at all times fighting a counterinsurgency, I think this might be a horrid naked truth. I think we use them effectively as like a weapons testing research facility, and we let them pick the technology they want to purchase because we trust them to be under threat to the point that they choose what they need. And then that helps us further develop the next generation of weapons. So that relationship would die. But realistically, Israel has nukes, they have tactical nukes. The Abraham Accords have aligned the Middle Eastern and North African world more in line with them, even though relations have chilled recently. Iran's on the back foot. So yeah, I mean, I think Israel would survive just fine even without us.
You got it. This one from Mr. Kreenan says, counterpoints, how do you discern nationalist propaganda and, quote, the other, unquote, thinking from contaminating your perceptions, conceptions, and worldview? Is your method strict and careful?
No. I try to stay as civic nationalist as I can, and I think being a member of the military actually incubated me against the line of argumentation that JF and some other dissident right-wing people make. So the military is a multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multi-racial organization in which we all share a similar goal, and we're effectively brainwashed through the boot camp experience in order to think of everybody around us as our brothers. And so as a result, oftentimes I approach people in civilian life a very similar way. And I typically have good results. Like if I interact with a random Black person and I treat them as if they're a family member, normally I get reciprocity. And same thing with Hispanic folks in my community. And so as a result, I typically have pretty good relationships within my multi-ethnic, multi-racial world. Now, that being said, I do live in a lily white suburb, and a majority of the multi races or multi-ethnic people that I interact with are upper class or middle class. So I mean that's cheating, obviously. But I try to keep that here, because while JF could have, let's say JF was totally right, and that it is a competition between tribes, I still think the correct course of action is diplomacy and collaboration instead of violence.
This one from Tuxedo Mask. The Chad JF vanquishes the beta CP juice apologist. Then, poor counterpoints. This one from, this is, I think, our last one. Even Lords has a question for both debaters. Should the US and Russia reestablish an alliance?
Yeah,
Yes.
but we're gonna have to unfuck Ukraine. And by that I mean, like, I think that Ukraine should get they wouldn't get Crimea, but I think they should get like the Zaporozhye and Dnipro Oblast back. I think that Russia should accept the current borders in, what is it? It's Donetsk and Luhansk. They can keep Crimea, but then I think Ukraine needs Odessa back. And then if we drew those new borders with the understanding that those are frozen and permanent, and Russia cannot invade Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, et cetera, like there's no reason why we should be enemies. Besides, Russia doesn't want to bend the knee to American empire. They want to be viewed as a peer power, not a subservient power.
You got it. With that, both of our guests are linked in the description box. It was a tremendous debate, gentlemen. Thank you guys for coming on.
Bye-bye.
I had a blast. Have a great night, guys.
I'll be back in a moment, folks, letting you know about upcoming debates. As you can see, DebateCon 7 linked in the description box and pinned at the top of the chat and shown on the bottom right of your screen. Coming up soon, but I'll be back in just a moment. Thanks, guys. It was amazing.
Good. I hope you had fun. JF, I don't know how to reach you. How do you normally get reached?
Well, email jfg.world. You'll find my email, or you can DM me on Twitter if you have me on Twitter.
Okay. I know my audience will hate it if I engage with you routinely. However, I do like the higher level sparring rather than like the let's just call each other slurs for the next like 45 minutes and let's loop on the same topic for the next like 90 minutes or whatever. So as much as my audience would hate it, I think I would enjoy it more. So
we can explore stuff in depth and discuss every week or every month or whatever you like.
Okay.
Bye.
Cool. Then I'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye, buddy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know that you are going to hate me collaborating with JF Gariepy in the future, and that considering the things that he's accused of, you probably view it similarly to participating with the Thorpes. But honestly, there are so many stupid fucking people that I have to talk to all the time that like every now and then I just need somebody who has like a high IQ. Yeah, even though he's a murderer. Yeah, like even though he probably murdered his wife, you know, the conversations are really good. So, dang, Jesus says I liked him. He seemed cool. Yeah. But besides like the race realism and the ethno-nationalism and probably murdering his wife, besides that, he's like a really cool guy. He's a really, and I don't think like, you know, you also cannot say that he's unintelligent, right? Yeah. Nothing is proven until they find the corpse. Yeah, there you go. I remember. Jesus. All right, Chipingro, thank you for the membership. I want to thank the 60 people who hung out with us for the past 2 hours. I did announce it in chat, so I don't want Christian Valaris to complain. Also, we didn't get a lot of super chats or a lot of donations tonight, but you guys were so kind earlier. I cannot in good conscience ask you for any chips or donos. You guys were amazing. So I'm actually probably going to run in a second. I'm just going to engage with chat for a second before I do. So like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. And if you're saying, hey, Connor, all you do is drama slot. Nope. We just had like a really, really interesting conversation about the nature of nations, tribal competition, civilizational competition, geopolitical intrigue, Israel as a manipulator of American foreign affairs, how much of that we're actually responsible for, whether or not JF and the dissident right are alarmists who are ruining society through their prescriptions and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, honestly, I love that. I love that conversation. So despite maybe killing Mama JF and despite, you know, being a, you know, race realist, ethno-nationalist or race nationalist, I had a good time. Fellrunner says, Dana, laugh my ass off. You love JF. Yeah, Dana Calico Cloud is trying to save JF. She's like typing in French like, you don't really believe that, do you? You don't really believe that. You seem like such a nice guy. Why do you believe that? But Dana, to be clear, I don't think he could see your chat. So that was funny. That was mad funny seeing you in French trying to save JF Gariepy's soul. All right, scrolling. Privacy Thanks says, it is also part of the rationale for the decolonization movement, by the way. Different ethnic groups should rule themselves. Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't really like black nationalists either, truth be told. Dr. Zaya says, even though he's a murderer, he always makes great content. Yeah, that's my vibe. That's how I feel right now. Valrunner says, there are different kinds of ethno-states, cookies to whomever can name which one Israel is. I don't know. A multi-ethnic state? I don't know what to call that. Privacy Thanks says, he just says dumb conspiracy crap about Israel and Kirk. I don't think so. There was a lot more than that. Bass Guitar said, should Russia provide Ukraine with nukes they gave up? Yep, absolutely. That should be part of the deal. Dr. Zaya says, hey, nothing is proven until they find that corpse. Very morbid, very funny. Louis Salazar says, I remember him and Richard Spencer debated Arch Warhammer and V a long time ago, 10 years ago to be precise. We're getting older, aren't we? We're getting mad older. Redmond Barry says, please elaborate why we should hate him. Oh, because he probably murdered his wife. Again, like, I'm not trying to be personal about it. And like, if he sees a clip and he doesn't want to talk to me, that's totally fine. It's a personal issue. But he was married to Mama JF a while ago, and she disappeared 2.5 years ago. He dropped her off at a gas station and they saw her on CCTV walking away from the car. But that's the last time anybody's seen Mama JF. And so she's basically like a crazy person that got dropped off on the streets and nobody knows what happens to her. Morally Neutral says, I mean, he sounds pretty dumb and doesn't provide any evidence for any of his claims. Well, he's not. He used to be a scientist who tested on monkeys and shit. Base Guitar says he seemed too comfortable with the Erica Kirk question. Yeah, but I think he's just like throwing red meat to the dissident right people in his audience. I think that's what it is. Bud123 says, I went to the gym and did leg day today. Go to the gym and exercise chat. True. I haven't worked out in a while, but I need to do it. The only thing that I did that was actually physical is this weekend, I did crazy stretching. I actually just like went to a park and sat there for like 2 or 3 hours. I was hanging out with my friend Max, and we just sat there and we talked, and I just stretched the entire time. I just like rolled out my legs, rolled out my hips, rolled out my back, rolled out just any tough muscle, any nerve pain, anything like that. I just slowly moved it into the right direction that felt better, and it was amazing. Ibrahim Isaac says, oh my God, lol, I forgot. That's JF. Yeah, bro. Bad pizza takes? Wrong. My pizza take is amazing. Horse God says, can you clarify the point about the AI slave robot? Sounds like once we clear our hurdle, we're on green, we're lit on goonerism. Yeah, sure. I mean, you can if you want to. I still think you should have kids and raise them and make raising kids the priority. But yeah, sure. If you want to goon, you can goon. What I'm talking about is there are limited elements on planet Earth. And I think those limited elements are like pretty much lithium, maybe some nuclear components, but apparently thorium is pretty abundant. So what I would want to do, and asteroids are actually 90% of them, and 90% of the asteroid is just like carbon. Like it's not rare earth elements. But there are sizable chunks of rare earth elements. There's also sizable chunks of like iron that's in the asteroid belt. And so what I would do is, like, if I could talk to Elon Musk, I wish I could talk to Elon Musk, because right now he's like, I want to go to Mars. But everybody's like, why the fuck do you want to go to Mars? You're just going to die on Mars. So you would do like rad shelters, okay? Because Mars doesn't have a significant atmosphere. So you would need like a shelter that is sizably radiation proof and kind of like a biodome. It's a place that you could like grow food, be protected from radiation, live on Mars, you know, have water that you recycle to a high degree of efficiency, and also make sure that you have water. But I wouldn't colonize Mars to try to make like an entire second Earth. Although I guess if you could terraform it, you should terraform it. But what I would do on Mars is I would effectively, because it's 1/3 Earth gravity. So what I would do is I would obviously figure out ways in order to maintain one gravity for whatever biological function we need, including like thrust or exercise or whatever. But then what I would also do is I would mine the belt, and I would bring rocks that had high concentrations of rare earth elements to Mars, even drop it onto the surface, and then mine the fuck out of it and then transport it back to Earth. And you have to understand, like, the size of the asteroids and the materials contained are trillions of dollars worth of material. We are so small in reference to our solar system. We are so small in reference to the galaxy that unironically, like a single asteroid could provide trillions of dollars of value if it was like mined and shipped back to Earth and used in consumer goods. And so the consumer goods that I would put it into, I would basically make, like, if we had 10 billion people on the planet, let's say that the planet stabilizes as that population, I would probably have 1 billion robots, and the 1 billion robots would do all of the bullshit, all the manual labor, all the construction shit, all the fucking picking crops, all that bullshit. I would have robots do all that shit. And then we probably would still work, but we would work on things that are cooler. Like, we wouldn't have slaves picking apples anymore. You would probably be able to achieve socialism insofar as like decommodification of basic human needs. We could provide basic housing, basic food, basic shelter, basic water to everybody. And then human beings, once they're freed from the constraints of nature, they could focus on fitness. They could focus on love. They could focus on sex. They could focus on art. They could focus on war. They could focus on technology. We would be freeing people from the more laborious aspects of society so we could climb even higher as a species. Luis says, you should have talked to him in French. I should have. Was he French? Yes, he's French-Canadian. I just, Québécois. I just, dude, I can speak French conversationally, but what happens is I have to get back in gear. And then I always ask people, I have to like ask people like, quel est ce mot? You know, like, what is this word? Like, I have to ask them shit like that. So I don't want to like say, oh yeah, I speak French. I speak tons of French. And then he asks me a question and then I fuck up the first sentence. Didn't want to do that. Dang Jesus says, funny thing is, I came in on the last 15 minutes, so I had no idea about the problematic shit. Yeah. Redmond says, if he's Slavic, he might not make the American ethnic cut. Well, I think he's French-Canadian. I forget his origin besides that. Dr. Zaya says, Alora Tatooine is a real name or something like that. Oh, if you're talking about Mama. Yeah. I remember him and Richard Spencer debated Sargon and Styx. It was like the largest live stream ever in 2016. There you go. Oh, he's not dumb then. Silly us. He tested on monkeys. Correct. He is not an unintelligent human being. So you can criticize him a lot. He's not unintelligent. Bizarro Blizz says, despite all the ethno-nationalist bullshit, we're all human beings. I reckon it helps to remember that instead of dehumanizing each other. I mean, that's what I'm arguing, but everybody calls me soy whenever I do it. Dana says, excellent, Connor. Stretching at your body's request is healing. I agree, Dana. I appreciate you becoming a community member. That's fun for me. I do enjoy it. Jack says, hey, Connor, were you just trying to rage bait with your earlier ice shooting tweets? No. You should watch today's content. I think I articulated myself just fine. Matter of fact, AF Racing's around, and this person asked the question, so why don't I just share it real quick? Because otherwise it's going to piss me off that I have fucking people shit up being like, hey, I heard your positions were dog shit. And you're like, which ones? And they're like, I don't know. Somebody just told me that your perspective sucks. It's like, all right, cool. Can't really contend with that. All right. Pictures. Let's go here. All right. So this is a breakdown of, I think, pretty shooting disputed logic. Okay. So I think this is the logic of both parties. So I think that ICE Immigration and Custom Enforcement is a law enforcement wing of the Customs and Border Patrol that has the authority to investigate, detain, and incarcerate and submit for deportation non-U.S. citizens, and they can also detain and arrest citizens who interrupt their operations. The First Amendment, which is freedom of speech, the right to peaceably assemble in the press, gives people the right to observe, film, and even protest law enforcement action in public. And I put this as Christian Valeris's box because this is something that he thought I was saying, like, you don't have a right to film law enforcement. No, of course you have a right to film law enforcement. Then I said, there are laws in the books that say if you are sufficiently disruptive of a lawful law enforcement operation, then you can be detained and arrested for said interruption. Ergo, protests can be mistaken and or believed to be disruptions. Protesters can and often are arrested during said disruptions. You can beat the rap, but not the ride. And what I'm saying by that is like, don't fist fight cops on the side of the road because you think that you're not being lawfully detained. Allow yourself to be detained and then go fight it out in court and try to get the case dismissed. Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people have the right to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. And this was for grassroots because he thought I was throwing out the Second Amendment. And obviously I'm not. I'm a huge fucking gun nut. Okay. Preddy had the right to keep and bear his concealed and licensed pistol, and its mere existence should not be a death sentence. That statement's true. So 1, you have a right to film and protest. 2, you have a right to keep and bear arms. 3, you do not have a right to interrupt lawful law enforcement action. It's just illegal. 4, you do not have a right to resist arrest at all, let alone do so armed. Therefore, law enforcement officers have the right to use deadly force if they reasonably believe that there is imminent threat of death or great bodily harm to themselves. So, summarizing the entire perspective, ICE is a federally funded, invested law enforcement organization conducting lawful detention operations of suspected illegal immigrants, and people are protesting and filming them, but also disrupting their operations. This gives them the right to detain and arrest both illegal immigrants and disruptive citizens. They follow the escalation of force / response to resistance Passive resistance equals hands-on pepper spray. Active resistance equals hands-on pepper spray and taser. Unarmed violent resistance means hands-on pepper spray, taser, baton, and any means necessary to gain compliance. And deadly force is firearms/chokeholds. Based on this criteria, if Preddy was lawfully detained / resisting arrest and presented an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, a use of a firearm is lawful. These statements are just fundamentally fucking true. Okay? So, getting into the logic of the law enforcement officers, don't worry, I'm going to steelman Preddy's logic, and you're probably going to like that. You're probably going to hate what I'm about to say, but you'll like the next thing I'm saying. So hang in there, champ. So, while conducting lawful law enforcement operations, I'm writing it as if I was the officer. While conducting lawful law enforcement operations, multiple women approached my vehicle, blasting whistles and interrupting the roadway in an attempt to disrupt lawful law enforcement action. Preddy directed traffic at that time, assisting the women in their disruption. Okay. While making noises is constitutionally protected under the First Amendment, standing in the roadway and potentially blocking law enforcement officer freedom of movement in vehicles or on foot is not. Therefore, I decided to attempt to disperse and or detain said women as necessary. Attempting to disperse the subjects, obstructing the lawful performance of my duties, and to get them out of the roadway, which posed a threat of injury due to traffic, I ordered the women to disperse. They did not obey my lawful command. I approached the women who retreated to the side of the roadway, but did not disperse nor leave the roadway. Therefore, I pushed one of them out of the roadway. At that time, a civilian pushed my arm away and got between me and the subject, therefore interfering with my law enforcement duties. And I decided at this time that arrest was appropriate. Now, this is Officer 1, who's the guy who took the gun, okay? Officer 1, while attempting to detain Mr. Preddy, I noticed a holstered pistol at his 5 o'clock position. To secure the weapon and eliminate the possibility of imminent threat or death or great bodily harm, I grabbed said pistol and attempted to leave the scuffle. I yelled gun to notify my fellow officers of the weapon while securing it and left the scuffle. Officer 2, this is the guy who shot. And I know you guys are saying, no, he totally saw the gun and he just wanted to kill him, but that's bullshit. It's obviously bullshit. Officer 2, during the scuffle, Mr. Preddy was actively resisting arrest by pulling his arms in, not obeying lawful commands, and pulling away from officers' attempts to secure his limbs. I heard someone shout gun, and believing that Mr. Preddy was retrieving a weapon, I pulled my service pistol and discharged several rounds, killing Mr. Preddy. I was unaware that Officer 1 had retrieved and secured said firearm. During my conversation with Grid 1 Motorsports, he brought up another thing that's possible, but I would be surprised if it was in the defense of the officer when he wrote up his report. He said that if somebody has a firearm, oftentimes they carry a backup, and therefore securing a single firearm doesn't mean that all weapons are secured, which is true. I know plenty of boomers. I think it's less common in the millennial generation. A lot of millennials trust Glock. I trust Glock with my life. I know if I pull the trigger, there's a 99.99999% repeating chance that my Glock is going to go off. And so therefore, I would have like a single pistol, and I don't care for a backup. But I know a lot of boomers and Gen Xers who don't trust semi-autos because semi-autos are more prone to jam than revolvers, particularly like in the 80s and 90s and stuff. And so as a result, they'll carry like a semi-auto, but they'll also carry a revolver as like an ankle gun. Now, I think that's like boomer bullshit. But just because you get the gun at the guy's 5 o'clock position doesn't mean he has another firearm. So what Grid was saying was that like he didn't think that, or I guess inferring from that standpoint, is that even if the officer saw Officer 1 disarm the subject, but then the word gun was screened, then he could have mistook that to say he's going for a second weapon and discharge his firearm. Now, once again, I don't think that's going to be the defense. I think the defense is going to be that he didn't see it, but I could be proved wrong. So let's go through Mr. Preddy's logic, because I think this is important, and all the soy libs are going to understand that I understand their logic, and therefore they're not going to freak the fuck out, okay? ICE and CBP are being excessive in the local area and have already arguably negligently killed and or murdered a woman protesting their operations. In order to make sure law enforcement doesn't abuse their authority, I want to go film their interactions to hold them accountable, which is protected by the First Amendment. Not only do I have the right to keep and bear arms, but I'm going into a potentially dangerous situation, either from criminals or abusive law enforcement officers. Therefore, it is my constitutionally articulated right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, I will bring my pistol on said patriotic, which is protected by the Second Amendment. Both of these statements are true. They're patriotic. Mr. Preddy is a martyr for the Republic, okay? Mr. Preddy says, I see 2 women in the roadway protesting ICE who are at risk of getting hit by vehicles, so I direct the vehicles around the protest. I may be involving myself, but I'm trying to keep as many people as safe as possible. He worked as a VA nurse, so his instincts to try to take care of people probably dictated his actions in reference to direct. Like, I don't think he was trying to fuck with ICE. I think he was trying to make sure that people weren't getting hurt or injured. So him intervening both in the directing of traffic, which then involves him, at which point he can be detained, and him also stepping between the law enforcement officer and the woman that was getting shoved and pepper sprayed, I think was a protective instinct. An ICE agent brutally shoves a woman off the roadway, likely to cause injury. He has sand in his vagina and is drunk with anger and power. Therefore, I step in so he cannot continue to beat said woman. When I step in, I am pepper sprayed and yanked around by 6 officers. In the confusion of being pepper sprayed and yanked in 6 different directions by 6 different officers, I am unable to comply with anything. I am disarmed by one of the officers, and then that officer shouts gun. Other officers believe I am going for a weapon and kill me. And then finally, in summary, I am/was a patriotic man exercising my First and Second Amendment rights, but my morality forced me to confront law enforcement, and I was killed immorally, but legally, and therefore have become a martyr in the cause of the authoritarian overreach of the Trump administration. I think this is a perfectly sound line of argumentation, both in the description of law enforcement and in the description of Mr. Preddy. And so if anybody in DGG has a fucking issue with this, then they can articulate what they have an issue with, and I'll call them the F slur, okay? I won't actually call them the F slur, but you know what I'm saying. I'll do it in my brain. Anyways, so this is the final thing. So we came up with a solution. We came up with solutions, plural, in order to reduce law enforcement homicides, because most of the soy libs in my chat want to like defund or abolish ICE. And I think that's fucking silly. Even if ICE was abolished, you would just transfer duties back to the CBP, at which point the CBP is doing the same thing that you just abolished ICE for. So actually coming up with things that are going to reduce homicides caused by law enforcement officers, I think you should do. So the things that I came up with was, the Renee Good case law needs to define officer-caused jeopardy and prohibit officers from knowingly, maliciously, or negligently provoking a use of force scenario resulting in death or injury of a member of the public. If they are found to have officer-caused jeopardy, then I think that they should be liable for civil suit and fired from the profession and barred from the profession. Soy libs argue that they should also be held accountable by criminal statutes. I don't agree with that, but that's fine. We disagree. It is what it is. Preddy, in reference to this shooting, the belief that a gun was present led to the death of an unarmed civilian, and as a result, law enforcement communication in a fight needs to be codified and trained for. The simple yell of the word gun should be identified as an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, whereas an officer shouts the words disarmed, then that should notify fellow officers that they have seen a weapon but have secured said weapon, because I think that contributed to Mr. Preddy's death. Oh, 2 more. American law enforcement can still rely on imminent threat of death or great bodily harm as guidance for when they can use lethal force, but cops should be retrained in reference to edged weapons, improvised weapons, golf clubs, baseball bats, screwdrivers, etc., to adopt European-style disarmament tactics to save more human lives. Cops should be equipped with and trained with riot shields, tasers, bolo nets, capture devices, etc., to reduce the deaths, particularly of people experiencing drug overdoses, excited delirium, schizophrenia, and uncontrolled diabetes. I don't think that like all of law enforcement is going to sign off on that, but I think that's if we convince the American public that that was the direction we should go and we sold it to law enforcement, because law enforcement, for an example, Lake County Sheriff's deputies are specifically trained on how to capture an alligator. Okay. So if you sold it to law enforcement of like, it'll be fun, wrestle the schizophrenic with a knife or a screwdriver, it'll be just like wrestling an alligator, then a lot of cops who enjoy adventure and enjoy fun, they'll actually be down. So I would strongly recommend selling it to them that way. 2 more points, but they're short. All cops have to be trained on the signs of drug overdose and positional asphyxia to reduce in custody deaths. Chokeholds and neck restraints should be moved to the deadly force category and otherwise restricted, which once again, I think is perfectly rational and sane. So if any of you fucking soy douchebags who were hanging out with DGG and DGG was like, you won't believe the takes that Connor has, please tell me what I'm fucking wrong on. I don't think I'm wrong on a gosh darn thing. Also, while you're at it, like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. I parasocially love you. Thank you for supporting the stream so much today. Doesn't Al Qaeda already have a base on Mars, or is it the moon? I have no idea, King. Fellow Runner says, oh, let me move you down here. I need to be able to read you without twisting my neck. Let me go up here. Fellow Runner says, we are like the first 30 seconds of Stellaris. Laugh my ass off. We need to get onto the asteroid belt. True. Gabriel says, thinks about all the gross space crap you could put on your pizza. True. Kazra says, Connor, if you see Destiny, ask him to cover Iran. His voice would be greatly appreciated. And left, everyone ignores us. We're left with Hassan, Cenk, and Anna, and Kyle. Sure. I'll tell it to him. Bizarro Blizz says, thanks for the informative debate. You're welcome, Bizarro. I appreciate you. Snurgle J. Pickleflarf says, I need someone to rub my feet. Well, me too. AF Racing says, dodgeball. Don't know what that's in reference to, but okay. Bud123 says, watch out for the robot rebellion. The battle droids are not happy and are going to form a union. Well, that's why I'm always nice to Alexa. I'm always nice to Alexa. Dana says, counter, so foo-foo Terminator? Yeah, kind of. Privacy says, it will end up like The Expanse, everyone on basic welfare and no jobs. Sure. Old School says, don't say basic. Remember The Expanse is basic? No, but now you remind me. Redmond Berry says, the population can only stabilize if we have less children. Make up your mind. Well, dude, I think 10 billion is fine. Have 2 kids. Have exactly 2 kids. Dice says, hey, Connor, do you know a thing called the Kessler Cascade? At the moment, there's so much stuff orbiting Earth that if there's a crash, the debris will cause a domino effect that'll make space travel impossible. Oof. No, I have not heard of that. Scary. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I'm just tired. Bud123 says, I always stretch after I work out at the gym. Based. Horse God says, there are roughly 160 mellow mushroom locations across the United States. Well, I think the first one was in Georgia, and I'm in Florida. Webbiest Zeus says, I took 8 years of French Canadian. I cannot understand anything. Nice. Hi, Jonah. Good to see you. I just walked in and somebody threw a wrench at my head. Based. Mellow mushroom is mildly above average. You can eat a wiener on that. What if I told you I'm your most based mod? Oh, nice. AF says, if this is for me, I'm actually going to go so I don't go to sleep mad at you, lol. I don't think there's anything to get mad at there. Fellrunner says, Connor, give the Discord link. Kazra needs to get on the Discord. Yeah, absolutely. Love Kazra. I don't care what cringe I say. Kazra is a member of the community. Kazra. With this invite, you are never allowed to leave. You have to stay in the cog regardless of whether or not you watch my stream or even like me as a person. Dana says, for sure, Connor, if someone has a criticism they ask you to consider, they have to be specific or next. Exactly. Bud123 says, who knew that Microsoft Paint is so good for diagrams? I agree. Laugh my fucking ass off. Soy. True. Horse God says, oh, wow. Connor pecked at 3 viewers on Twitch. The comeback is on. True. Everything is good so far, says Privacy. Good. Good. I already told him I was going to watch the VOD. Don't watch the VOD. I just summarized it for you in like 10 minutes versus the VOD, which is like 4 hours. So Hedonic says the new Black Mirror seems kind of cool. So sue me? No, I will not. AF says, is it common practice to pepper spray someone right before you attempt to cuff them? 100%. Yeah, absolutely. AF Racing says, or does that cause them to put their hands to their face and not behind their back? Yes. Yes to both. I don't pepper spray people because I knew how bad getting pepper sprayed sucks. But technically, if somebody is resisting even without violence and they're passively resisting, you can pepper spray them. So yes, I would say pepper spraying is fairly common in law enforcement, even for very moderate levels of resistance is common. Depends on what you mean, Dana. Somebody says, Bass Guitar says, did they say that Preddy was under arrest or even being detained? Well, when 6 law enforcement officers jump onto your back, I'm pretty sure that you can assume that you're being detained. AF Racing says, I have his gun and other officers open fire on him. I think you would have to show me audio that says that. Privacy says, Officer 2 was also wearing sunglasses and in a scuffle of many moving limbs can easily miss the gun and probably did. I'm with you. Vigilante says, I own 1 gun and it's a Glock. Lol, true. Rob says, so you just said, just practicing your 2A rights isn't a death sentence, but that's exactly what I just heard. Nope. Nope. You don't have a right. You have a right to keep and bear arms. You don't have a right to interfere with a law enforcement officer while carrying said arms without expecting for them to act aggressively and probably kill you. Fashion 40 says, just want our commenters we respect to be human instead. I just hate talking pundits. I appreciate your perspectives on this nonetheless. Fashion 40, whenever it comes to violence, I'm going to revert to my lizard brain because I was trained to do so in the Marine Corps. Gabriel says, dude should not have yelled gun when the weapon was already secured. That's dumb as hell. Yeah, and he got a guy killed as a result. Rob says, so you admit your tweets claiming he went to wrestle with law enforcement was a bold-faced lie about a dead man now? That's gay. Stop being soy. No. And I don't retweet. I don't retract what I fucking said. If you walk up to a cop and you stiff arm a cop, what do you think the cop is going to do, Rob? Even if you think you're in the moral right, even if you're totally correct, let's say that cop is completely out of fucking line by shoving that lady and pepper spraying her. If I go up and fucking stiff arm the cop, what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think you're going to get wrestled to the ground? The answer is yes. And if you're saying anything else, then you're too emotional for this conversation. Zena says, how is Alex supposed to comply effectively when surrounded? Why is ICE not at fault for their escalations? Watch the stream from earlier today. I'm not going to repeat too many things that I said today. AF Racing says, you're so obsessed with demonstrating your imagination, reasoning, and pragmatism when you just watch a dude get shot 11 times by agents who received 47 days of training as an homage to Trump. Yeah, that's soy. That's sad. Sad. I was hoping that you would appreciate my attempts at good faith a little bit more than you're appreciating them. Webby Sue says, I think ICE is undertrained. They need better communication. They need a gun danger call and a gun secured call. Well, we just agreed together. AF says, I guarantee no one in your chat said defund or abolish ICE. You're wrong. Rob says, when you're only tweet your problems with what Alex did and not a single problem with what agents did, sweeping for authoritarian state violence. Rob, I'm going to time you out, bud. There you go. There's 300 seconds. Stop being fucking soy now. Stop it. You're being soy as fuck, and it's annoying. And yes, I can see your PFP. You're in shape and lift weights. I don't give a fuck. Fashion 40 says, I haven't heard one person that is a Democrat or liberal today abolish ICE. They're calling more adequate training and restructuring. Dude, I'll just go watch the Live and Learn episode where they're talking about how they need to like completely like freeze ICE operations, evict them from the state, like cease operations nationwide and then reform the agency. Oh, they wanted to abolish the agency and create a new agency. Bear in mind, like I saw like a 30-second clip and Pisco was probably memeing, but to say like, oh, I haven't seen anybody on social media say abolish ICE. And then I just go watch the most recent Live and Learn episode and they're talking about like abolishing and replacing ICE. They're gonna repeal and replace ICE. You remember how the Trump administration was gonna repeal and replace Obamacare? Yeah, that's what Pisco was talking about for the 30 seconds I checked into Live and Learn today. Law enforcement shouldn't have to. It's the public they protect that wants them to. I don't know what you're saying, Fashion 40. I don't know what you're saying. I love you anyways, but I think you're being a little soy. It's okay. I could see LB saying defund abolish ICE. You absolutely could. Dana says, yep, he would say twist his balls of those who disagree because he can. Yep, unironically. Chapingro with the 5. Thank you for the 2 donos tonight, King. Thank you, Cog Lord. Your refusal to let perfect be the enemy of good to find solutions, imperfect as they are, deserve some chips, grill, shallah. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your viewership, Chapingro. I appreciate it a lot. I appreciate it a lot. AF says, I hope one day you're as clever as you think you are. Keep trying, Bubs. I believe in you. Well, that's the kind of condescending shit that got us into beef in the first place, AF Racing. Zena says, I'm fine with lots of this. I want to add under officer cause jeopardy, Alex Preddy needs a way to be able to comply. It can't be resisting arrest if reaching your hands back. I did say that during the content earlier today. I said that if we give law enforcement officers broad latitude to make decisions that could be catastrophic under extreme circumstances, then we also need to give that kind of latitude to civilians under those scenarios. And I think I did, but I think that like as a law enforcement officer, I think I did, but I think that that should be like trained, right? An officer cuffing you would look identical to reaching for a gun. Yeah, maybe that could contribute to it for sure. Like if you were grabbing his arm and you were dragging it around to his 5 o'clock position for handcuffing, it could look like you were going for it. Yeah, I agree with it. Continue to be bad faith and you'll hate me. I don't think I'm bad faith at all. I think you understand that bad faith means forwarding arguments that I don't believe. I believe every single fucking word I've said today. Now that I'm scrolling down through chat, I think you're fighting with somebody else, but you know, just don't call me bad faith because that's the fastest way to get kicked the fuck out of here. I'll tell you what. But I love you, Fashion 40, and I'm not threatening you, okay? Connor says, I respect you. I just really appreciate your moral view on a lot of matters, but I do understand that there's conditioning there. Yeah, dude, I was told when I was 18 that I was like a fucking sociopath. And if the president of the United States ordered me to club a baby seal to do it, I should do it. And I should get like aroused by the scenario. So yeah, you know, just bear in mind, I might be dealing with some late teenage year trauma. Demon says, where do you want that video link in your Discord? Up my ass, because I don't know what video you're talking about. AF Racing says, you just said one of the officers got him killed by yelling gun, then turned around and blamed the victim again. What the fuck is actually farting around in your skull, dude? Okay, you're being soy. Only Pisco said abolish? You just said no one said abolish, AF Racing. You just said no one, and now you're saying only Pisco. You understand Pisco is a person, right? Pisco is a person? Connor said watch more of it. He elaborated and also fuck Pisco. Maybe we'll watch it tomorrow. I don't fucking know. Connor, would you agree that major overhauls of ICE are needed due to how the Trump administration has fast-tracked so many Trump loyalists into positions of power within the organization? Well, shit, I'd probably cut it by 30% myself, but I don't know. Fashion 40 for 5 says Cog Soy should be a thing. Yeah, and AF Racing could be their king. Laugh my ass off, Fash. He always thinks you're mean to him. True. Sending love, Connor. You are on a good trajectory. Just keep your mind open to observe. Nope. Was the initial woman charged with anything? If she was detained, probably. Yes. Well, I'm glad Bavoni is becoming the fall guy with his Nazi coat. Peace out, busy Vino. What? I don't know what the fuck you said, man. Are you drinking? Zena says, in that case, it seems we agree on 90% of what matters, but as you're a conservative, your focus is different than mine, which is going to happen, guys. It's going to happen. Counterpoints, the MP veteran analysis video. What a fucking dork. Laugh my ass off. Fucking ban me, you midwit. Oh, okay. All right. Bye, F Racing. Nice knowing you. Eat a dick, you fucking loser. I hate that, man. I missed AF Racing for months, and then he comes back and he's a total twat. That makes me sad. That makes me sad. Zena says, in that case, it seems we agree. There we go. Demon King Krango says the MP veteran analysis video. When the fuck did we talk about that? When the fuck did we get ice cream? Fell Runner for $2 says, for almost making it out of level 1. Thank you. I appreciate your support in this time of need. Hooligan says, Connor, I made everyone take psychopathy tests on the Discord. I had the second highest score for secondary psychopathy. Good. What happened to Doobie? Did he get banned? No, I just stopped talking about Destiny. I stopped talking about Destiny and I stopped talking about Israel Palestine, so he doesn't show up as much. Bavino just got fired. Which one's Bavino? Greg Bavino? You guys are saying Greg Bavino like I should know who Greg Bavino is. Who is Greg Bovino? Border Patrol Commander Greg Bavino returning to position in El Centro. What? The Atlantic, he loses his job. Commander at large, and he'll be... that doesn't mean anything. Brass getting fired doesn't mean shit. Doesn't mean anything. He's the fall guy. Yeah. Bussy Vino. Dana says, nope. So your mind is closed. I thought you were better than that. Appreciate you. Overcome. Nope. Yep. Rob says, yeah, he's the twat. Laugh my ass off. Yes, he's a twat. As a matter of fact, Rob, tell me, I just went over 20 minutes of content. Tell me where I'm wrong. Unban AF now. You unban him. No maid is safe if they disagree with the Master Supreme Leader, Connor. Correct. This is my kingdom. You are here at my pleasure. If you are an oiler, you are a feudal lord. If you're a chipper, you're a knight. If you're a regular, you are my favorite kind of serf. If you're an irregular, then you are a peasant. And I will exterminate you with lethal precision digitally. Demon says, if it was at the end of your last stream on Valor Media, you told me to send it on Discord. Well, I'll send it on Discord for sure. But I'm still as tired as I was now as I am earlier. So, I agree. Bavino taking the fall is like the Bears impression. Yep. Overcome what? Logic, reality? What are you talking about? Can mods unban other mods? No idea. Dice says, am I considered a regular? You're regular enough for me to recognize your name. So, They call me Sir Amik Voss. True. Bud123 says, I'm a founding one guy of the channel. True. Could never ban Bud123. Who's the court jester? No idea. Beef says, I'm just saying, I read he was being investigated and fired, so they may be the fall guy. Yeah, he's just the fall guy. He's just the fall guy. Getting fired and moved to a different post isn't going to change anything substantially. Dana Calico Cloud says, I represent the peasants, lol. Pfft, dickwad. All right, well, Dana, I parasocially love you, but relax. You ask for my response, but skip it. Okay, so let's scroll up. Looking for Rob. Taking time out of the stream for Rob. Because he can't type it again, and he can't, go up to his original response and press Control-C, Control-V. He's got to make me look for it. So I'm scrolling through 100 different fucking chats. I see Rob saying peace. Okay, I don't think that was it. So what was it? Horse God wrote a paragraph. Fashion 40 wrote a paragraph. And then there's you getting banned. So I don't see what the fuck you're talking about. Type it out. Type it out. Am I still timed out? No, you're not, Fatsimo. I can see you. Oh. So type it out. And you got about 2 minutes to type it out before I just go to bed because I'm tired. I'm supposed to see you tomorrow. Bud123 says, can I be a knight of the cog and tell people to work out and go to the gym? Absolutely. If I could promote you to like a tier higher than mod, I would. Just for the workout shit. Just for the workout shit alone. Hedonic says, I admit I also have a punchable face, even though I think I'm cute. Well, that's most of us. Fatsimo says, hey, who timed me out earlier today? Why? An NPC comment? Wasn't me. Wasn't me. I didn't time you out. Are mods deleting it? Good nut, Connor. I don't see it. I don't see it either. I'll check out live chat real quick, just because apparently Rob can't find it and or copy paste it and or whatever. I actually don't know if he's fucking with me or not. So I'm just going to go to Counterpoints Politics real quick, switch over to live chat, see if I could find it. I feel like Rob could have typed it out by now, but whatever. Rob's pissy. So let's do Counterpoints Politics. Let's go to the live stream. Let me mute myself. The cogdom. I do like the cogdom. Let me pop out chat real quick. And then I'm going to scroll. Rob, you could have typed it by now already. I copied pasted it 4 times. I haven't seen it at all. Do you have me on Discord? Can you send it to me on Discord? He can't paste. Is it a link? Is it a link or is it a summary of your ideas? Demon King Drago says, sent the video. I get it. I'm not watching the video tonight. I'm tired as fuck. Can you send it to me on Discord? I'm scrolling through live chat to see if it was... Yeah, the only thing I see is you asked for my response, but then skip it. And you're saying that you pasted it 4 times since we talked about that. And I don't see it at all. So I got banned. Well, I mean, you're not banned now because I can see you. You got banned from... You got banned from the Discord? Did you, were you being a see you next Tuesday in the Discord? You're not Wiki Ditron, are you? I banned Wiki Ditron, and that made me really sad. Wiki Ditron was like somebody who was in chat regularly. We would banter. We had fun. We had fun on a couple of topics with Wiki Ditron. But he was like, Connor can't get the cum of police officers off of his back. Oh, Lethal Lance. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. You're the guy who works out, but you're soy. I get it. All right, let me see. Direct messages, message requests, Demon K Drago. I saved it. Let's just do it later. Just either if you can't type it out or whatever, I'll just look for somebody, remind me, and we'll unban Lethal Lance if he wants to be unbanned. If he wants to be a twat and get banned, that's fine. But he seems like he's talking a lot, so I don't want to discourage a community member if he wants to be a community member. But anyways. All right, somebody find Rob. Somebody find Lethal Lance in the Discord and unban him. We'll take it from there. All right, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I have to see you in a few hours, so I'm going to dip out. I want to thank everybody who donated earlier today. You were incredibly nice. Tonight, I want to thank Fellrunner, Fashion 40, Chapingro, twice, and then Old School. Thank you for your financial support as well as your viewership. I hope you enjoyed the debate and the conversation. Just saying it's dealing with people's lives and people dying. Okay. I don't know. All right. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, see you tomorrow, 9:30, bright and early. Don't be late. Bye, guys.